we present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Clement Freud and Tim Rice in just a minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, I'm going to ask our four panelists to talk, if they can, on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject on the card. We welcome as our guest Tim Rice. The other three are regulars, as you know, and we'll begin the show with Kenneth Williams, and who better? Kenneth, the subject being forceful. Will you try and tell us something about that subject in 60 seconds, starting now?
I suppose the one person in English life who epitomised this gift was Winston Churchill, and in his utterances it was the forceful nature that so impressed us in an hour of great adversity, when he would say, if the Nazis will all the Germanic benefit of war were to surge along right in front, or South End to Pier, I would define them.
Tim Rice has challenged. Tim, what is your challenge?
There was a repetition of "oh."
Tim, as a newcomer, I will be generous because I think that's a good challenge, and how else do you judge but to say yes to our guest and say, Tim, you have a point for a correct challenge and you take over the subject with 33 seconds left, starting now.
Being forceful is something I find very difficult, as I am an extremely modest person, almost without fault, quiet, temperate, and extremely concerned with not offending other people who might be upset by a loud, boisterous person throwing...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of person.
That is right, yes. Clement, you have the subject. You have a point for a correct challenge, and there are 18 seconds. Being forceful, starting now.
Being forceful is something I always connect with husbands and fathers of the bride in marriages, and if I had my way, it would become infinitely more difficult to get married and incredibly easy to become divorced. That seems to me the only way in which
Well, for those of you who may not be thoroughly aware of the rules, they are that whoever is speaking when the whistle blows gains an extra point, and it was, of course, Clement Freud. So at the end of that round, he has 2 points, Tim Rice has 1, and Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? The subject, a simple devil. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
a devil can be any number of things, not only satanic, but also in the printing industry, and particularly in culinary usage. If you eat deviled whitebait, it is that fish covered in paprika, cayenne, mustard, Worcestershire sauce, and all sorts of things which make it...
Peter Jones' challenge.
Well, if it's covered in all those things, it can't be simple, can it? It's quite a complicated dish.
Yes, a very good challenge. Well done, Peter. You have the subject of a simple devil and the 40 seconds left, starting now.
Well, a simple devil is someone who works in a printing office.
And Tim Rice is challenged.
I thought I heard an
You did hear a hesitation, or there was a hesitation, yes. 26 seconds are left on a simple devil with you, Tim, starting now.
I was attempting to enthrall the assembled throng with a breakdown of my character last time I was speaking before being rudely interrupted by...
Kenneth Williams is
Deviation,
challenged.
this is not discussing a simple devil.
I was talking about myself.
I think we should stick to the subject, you see. You must stick to your subject, you see.
Yes,
you were
and I
talking
think
about your character.
You didn't
and if
establish
your
early
simple devil, well...
All right, Kenneth, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I don't think you established early enough that you were on the subject of the simple
No,
devil.
you didn't establish. You're quite right. Very good chairman. I like that. Very good chairman. Very nice.
Wait till I give a decision against him.
Yes. And anyway, I don't think he was rudely interrupted. I mean, there's all the difference in the world between... and isn't there?
Yes, definitely, Peter. Well done. 29 seconds. Kenneth Williams, you had the subject of a simple devil starting now.
Well, this obviously refers to the element of evil which is without any kind of gradation, or what we might call the element of
Clement Freud.
repetition of element.
Yes, there was, I'm afraid, Kenneth. There are 19 seconds on a simple devil with you, Clement, starting now.
Hardly any source of any...
He stomachs himself in the... I just couldn't get it out.
I know, but you were doing the flummoxing, but you didn't get in.
You're
Tim
quite
Rice
right.
managed, yes. So, for those of you who haven't got visual radio yet, Kenneth was sort of doing a bit of one-upmanship on Clement and causing him to pause. Tim Rice got in, and Tim, your challenge?
Well, it was just that he seemed to collapse totally.
Yes, it was a pause. 16 seconds, a simple devil starting now.
Let me get right to the point this time, without any hesitation, and say I am a simple devil. Not moronic, stupid, unintelligent, or facile, but plainly ordinary. This means uncomplicated and grippingly interesting.
Clement Freud.
Repetition. We had uncomplicated in his last little series.
You did, and I'm afraid.
No, you didn't.
In the last...
He didn't say uncomplicated, it was me.
But you did actually say...
he's talking
earlier
about
on.
himself all the time. It's an ego trip for him.
Well, he doesn't come on the show very often. I mean,
Well,
we
that's
give
no
him...
excuse.
He got to unburden himself. Got to unburden himself.
Clement, you cleverly got in with 3 seconds to go with a simple devil starting now.
The very simplest of all devils would contain Parmesan cheese.
Clement Freud was again speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point and has increased his lead at the end of the round. Peter Jones, will you begin the next round? The subject is parts I refuse to play. Somebody's imagination is already running wild. Will you allow her and us to enjoy your ideas in 60 seconds starting now?
Well, there aren't very many that I have ever refused, I must say, and anybody who knows anything about my record in the theatre will realise that I've accepted a great many parts which any intelligent person would have refused, because I obviously couldn't do them at all well. But I would like to take this opportunity of informing any theatrical manager, producer or director who may or may not be listening, and that includes Kenneth, who I know isn't listening. I am...
Clement Freud, who challenged.
Repetition of listening.
Yes,
But could he go on? Because
So we give Clement Freud a point for a correct challenge, but he wants Peter to continue, which is very nice. So, Peter, there are 31 seconds on parts I refuse to play, starting now.
A prepaid, stamped addressed envelope sent to me at the BBC will no doubt elicit an acceptance of practically any part, no matter what salary.
Kenneth,
I'm back to a halt, I'm afraid.
yes, he did come to a halt,
Definitely
yes.
came to a halt.
Kenneth, you have the subject. There are 18 and a half seconds left on parts I refuse to play, starting now.
I would now refuse to play certain parts which in the past I accepted with alacrity, but now realise to my cost with the benefit of hindsight.
Clement Freud. as challenge.
repetition of past.
Yes.
You are a great fool, you know. Stand away. It's ridiculous. I was going to say quite interesting, but I won't now.
There were only 7 or 8 seconds left, and so Clement will talk on the subject during that time, starting now.
Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, also Ophelia I wouldn't play.
So Clement Freud got quite a number of points in that round, increased his lead. Tim Rice, by the way, is still in second place, 1 ahead of Kenneth Williams and 2 ahead of Peter Jones, and Tim will begin the next round. The subject is chivalry. Tim, will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Chivalry has been sadly lacking in this programme to date. Here I am, a new, inexperienced programmer, and I have been subjected to abuse. I have attempted only to...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, he said I 3 times.
And he's proved his point. He has been subjected to abuse. So I'm not going to allow it and be generous, as he's new to the game, allow him to keep the subject, and he has 52
But it's
seconds.
I all the time. It's like one of these South American numbers that he writes.
Give Peter Jones a bonus point for a very good joke, even only half the audience got it. And Tim, if you have another eye, then I'm afraid I will have to penalise you. But continue now with 51 and a half seconds on chivalry, starting now.
Speaking for my...
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
Yes, I'm afraid he was inhibited by my generosity. 1.5 seconds, actually, before you uttered. Right, Kenneth, we're with you. 50 seconds on chivalry starting now.
There are endless examples of this in the history of our country. Boadicea is reputed to give an old harridan in Dawlish a ride on her bullock cart for no other reason than the poor old thing appeared to be exhausted. And the same with Walter Raleigh when he laid it down and said to Elizabeth, "Here, tread on that." She accepted this, and I believe she did. It's an example.
Clement Freud is challenged.
What's he on about? Nothing to say anyway, he just burbles. He's a windbag, isn't he?
What does he
Repetition of
repeat?
believe.
What's that?
Repetition of believe.
Yes, he did. I don't remember him saying it.
Oh, doesn't matter. Let him have it. Let him have
Well,
it.
now I'm going to put it to the audience
Oh, let
because
him have it.
because you were going with such style and panache. I'd forgotten about the game. I was enjoying it all. I'll put it to the audience because I'm afraid
let
I
him
didn't
go
spot
on.
it.
Let
No,
him
no, I'm going to let them judge. If you agree with Clement's challenge, will you cheer for Clement and boo for Kenneth and all do it together now? Unanimous. They want you to continue, Kenneth. You have another point in 30 seconds on chivalry, starting now.
It's emblazoned on one of the chivalric orders, in fact. Evil to him who evil thinks. Oh, of course,
And Tim Rice has got
No.
in.
Give it to the audience.
No,
Let the audience decide.
yes.
Well, it is on the order of the Garter, and you can't say it any other way except by repeating it, can you?
No, but you can
Well, you
say
were wrong
that-
to, try, Kenneth.
I
It was,
see,
it was a
yes.
bad mistake, and I'm have
Tim,
no
you have the
hesitation.
subject, and you have 22 seconds on chivalry starting now.
An example of chivalry which I personally experienced.
Clement Freud's challenge.
We weren't going to let Tim say I anymore.
This time, Clement Freud has to have it. Well, listen, Clem. There are 20. There are 20 seconds left on chivalry starting now. Peter Jones has challenged. Yes, he was nobbled again. Kenneth was being even more ridiculous and
More
outrageous.
than nobbled.
Peter Jones has the subject. There are 18 seconds left on chivalry, starting now.
Well, it's something that I should like to see revived, and I'd like to begin by having the AA patrolmen.
Tim Rice has challenged.
Repetition of A.
Yes. You should have said the RAC instead. There are 12 seconds on chivalry with you, Tim, starting now.
Me was driving to Liverpool the other night, and I saw a lonely hitchhiker.
Peter Jones has challenged.
He said, I saw a lonely hitchhiker.
Well, after this round, we will not keep challenging on I, but as I did say, in this round, we would allow it. Peter, you have the subject back, and there are 7 seconds, chivalry starting now.
And they would salute every car that passed them on the motorway, whether they were members of this organisation or not. And I think that would bring...
Peter Jones, speaking as the whistle went, gained the extra point. At the end of that round, he's equal in 4th place with Kenneth Williams. They're only 1 behind Tim Rice, and they are 4 behind our leader, who's still Clement Freud. Kenneth, we're back with you to begin. The subject, one of those historical ones which we know you enjoy, John Selden, who was born in 1584. Will you tell us something about him in the game starting now?
One of the most delightful aspects of his work is this table talk volume he published, and there is a charming account of an old blind violinist led into the company by a boy to play for them, and during the course of it the lad noticed they were all sneering and grinning, and he said, "Let us away, father, for they're laughing at us." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, boy, when we get their money we'll be laughing at them."
Tim Rice was challenged.
Couple of boys there, I think.
Yes, he said boy more than once.
Yes, it was twice, in fact.
Well, I'm glad you were counting.
Yes. But I mean, it's not worth interrupting a charming story like that for a silly.
He let you go quite a long time, actually, before he interrupted
Oh,
you.
that's big of him, isn't it?
Well, in spite
didn't let him
of
go as
the
long as
fact
I
that you are trying to lecture us on historical fact, we are still trying to play just a minute. So Tim was right to come in, and there are 28 seconds for him to talk about John Selden, 1584, starting now.
What can I tell tell you about John Selden, born in 1584, that you don't already know? The answer is not a lot, chum, because my knowledge of this esteemed gentleman is scanty in the extreme. However, do not stop me in my tracks, because I have many gripping instances of...
Freud, challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes. 11 seconds. John Selden with you, Clement, starting now.
The most memorable thing about John Selden is his enormous disapproval at the beheading of Charles I. He, of all...
Tim Rice challenged.
Well, Charles I was beheaded in 1649, so this cove
Well, it's
would have
actually
been pretty
true. He
old.
did disapprove.
Did he really?
In writing.
He actually disapproved.
Yes, definitely.
wrote about it.
He wrote about
He was
it.
anti-regicide, surely you know that.
I've never heard of this mush.
Yes. Very good song for your next musical, Anti-Regicide.
I apologise at the...
You stupid great nit coming in there, ruining it. In the middle,
Clement.
weren't you? You were underway, weren't you? Just got
Underway?
into your stride, didn't you?
3 seconds. John Selden starting now.
In 1600...
Peter Jones's challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I'm afraid.
All right, 1.5 seconds with you, Peter, on John Selden starting now.
In 1605, he was 24 years old.
Well, they all gain points in that round, but Clement Freud is still in the lead. And Clement, your turn to begin. And the subject, ancient, unnecessary, unrepealed laws. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
There is something called the Town Clauses Act, and if you were to read this carefully, the most extraordinary number of ancient, unnecessary, and almost unrepeatable laws would be yours at the touch of a page. For instance, it is illegal to fly a kite. It is not permitted to clean a window from the outside. And I'm not at all sure why these things have happened, but the sad thing is that they have occurred and are part and parcel of the same legislation which stops people soliciting in the street. And therefore, if you allow a horse to urinate on the pavement, a simple thing which any one of us...
Tim Rice.
You've definitely had at least two things.
Yes, he did.
So does a horse.
Enough said. 16 seconds for you, Tim, to take over the subject of ancient, unnecessary, unrepealed laws, starting now.
How absurd it is that a chap cannot wander into a pub at any time of the day or night and down a glass of gin, whiskey, beer, brandy, wine, red or white, muscadet, chablis...
So, Tim Rice speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point, and others in the round, and moved forward into second place, just behind Clement Freud. And Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject, electronics. Will you tell us something about those in 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, that's the kind of subject that brings on my paranoia, because I know that it's been chosen, because they are well aware that I don't know anything about it.
Kenneth Williams.
Because I know it's been chosen because I know nothing.
Yes, Kenneth, you have the subject of electronics. 51.5 seconds, starting now.
It has brought us the advantages of all kinds of things, from computers to these telescopes that can tell you what's happening in outer space at the touch of a button. In fact, it can be rightly proclaimed that the use of the instruments which electronics has given rise to has caused the brain to ossify in many people who would have once added up their own sums and now keep pressing all these buttons instead, you see. I think it should be banned, and I don't approve at all. I'm so angry because I don't approve it in schools, and I think they use it in schools. They allow children to use it. I think it's very bad.
Tim, what was your challenge?
Yes, what was you on about?
Well, I thought he hesitated.
What? I can't hear. Speak up.
There was a definite hesitation.
Actually, that's what he wanted you to do.
He's
He wanted.
He's right. You can't.
I didn't think he was right because you kept going. I couldn't hear what you were saying.
It was my anger, you see. I was getting all worked up. One of those, you know.
You did actually pause because I mean your mouth was moving. I didn't know where the words were coming out.
You are nice. You are
Yeah.
a nice fellow. He's nice.
Actually, I I don't know whether any sound was being picked up. I thought you
Oh,
weren't.
we're going to give the guest the benefit, I think.
I've
don't
given
you?
him that a number of
As we've been
times.
on about
13
chivalry
seconds
and
for
all
you,
that.
then, Tim, on electronics starting now.
Electronics have made great inroads into the world of art, and I'm talking about theatre, records, films, and other kinds of entertainment which all too often depend on modern electrical things.
Clement Freud is challenged.
That was hesitation.
Yes, I would call it a form of hesitation, so you cleverly got in with 2 seconds to go on electronics starting now.
I have a digital watch that lights up.
Well, Clement Freud increased his lead at the end of the round. Tim Rice increased his position ahead of Peter Jones and Kenneth Williams. And Tim, we're back with you to start. The subject this time is the geometric markings near Nazca in Peru. You know something about them? If not, will you please tell us something about them in 60 seconds, starting now?
Come with me now to Nazca, Peru, where there are some very famous geometric markings. There are some on the hillside, but far more interestingly, there is a teacher there, an extremely well-known imparter of information to...
Peter Jones is challenged.
Well, he did hesitate,
Yes, I think you're right, Peter.
and I had to weigh that in the balance against my complete ignorance of the geometric markings in Peru.
Well, I would save it because you could have actually said that in the round, couldn't you? Because you have 47 seconds in which to try and talk on the subject, starting now.
Well, we in England have got some interesting geometric markings in Wiltshire, cut into the chalk.
Clement Freud.
Deviation, the subject is not.
Well,
the,
all right, but Clement
deviation,
Freud
the subject
challenged.
is not the geometric markers in Wiltshire. The subject is the ones in Peru.
Clement
Yes, but
Freud
it's only
challenged,
by
and
the
Kenneth Williams...
basis of his challenge.
Yes,
That's the basis. He can't speak at the moment because he's got this cough. I'm doing it for him.
so Kenneth is working Clement Freud and working him very well, but he hasn't got his hand
It's
up the
only
back of
by
his jacket.
comparing them that we can get them into perspective. That's my point.
You
What
don't
a load of hogwash. You really expect us to believe that?
So, hogwash, what
Are
about
you
it?
saying they go to Wiltshire and look at the geometric markers there and then go to Peru and say, oh, look at the difference between areas in Wiltshire? Is that what you're having us believe?
I dare say there are...
Codswallop,
Kenneth, I dare say there are people like that and would do exactly that, but Peter did not establish that, so...
I don't see why you should have the monopoly of codswallop in this programme.
And I don't have to stay here to be insulted by you, Peter Jones.
You can go somewhere else.
Yes, thank you. Portland Street.
Kenneth,
Like this.
having finished with the insults for a time, let's get back to the game. Clement Freud actually challenged, though he hasn't spoken. You told us what his challenge is, and he has 32 seconds to tell us something about the geometric markings near Nazca, Peru, starting now.
When you talk about geometric markings near Nazca in Peru, the crucial point is how near. For instance, Tunbridge Wells, by popular consent, has got to be closer to Nazca in Peru than Kilmarnock or Motherwell. And if you were to look at the comparative proximity...
Tim Rice is challenged.
This is appalling deviation.
Yes, I would agree. Don't let's go into details about it. I think it's deviation.
It's also very boring, if I may say so.
Yes, 12 seconds on the geometric markings near Nazca, Peru, Tim, starting now.
Jose Emmanuel Sidebottom is a man whose geometric teaching is without parallel in the southern hemisphere of the American...
Peter Jones is challenged.
Actually, the parallel figures very largely in these geometric markings. Anyone who's studied it will know that they appear at least 4 times in the left-hand corner at the bottom of this huge square.
I thought you said you couldn't talk on the subject.
Well, I didn't want to...
Well, anyway, you've got 4 seconds left to try and do so to win an extra point, so start now.
Parallelograms and triangles...
Well, it's a keen contest with a lot of points being scored. Kenneth Williams, in spite of being in 4th place, has quite a few points. Peter Jones has crept up, only 1 behind Tim Rice, and he's only 2 behind our leader, still Clement Freud. Kenneth Williams, back with you to begin, and the subject, red tape. Will you tell us something about that boring subject in just a minute, starting now?
Material is used by legal people to type their documents, but it's come to be a synonym for any kind of bureaucratic obstructiveness or obscurantism. Call it what you will. It's up to you, whatever sobriquet you prefer. I will not draw any kind of objection to it, but I understand the frustration that so many people feel when it comes to actually getting a job done and being told a mass of legal rigmarole rigmarole is standing twixt them and the object of their desires. And humanity is about desire, what we all want in our bowels. And the thing is to get on with it, not to be hanging about and be told, oh, we can't do this to that, oh, we can't do that to this. And we get fed up and say, well, why not? Get it done and get it done today. We don't want all this hanging about. We are sunk under the weight of the heaviness of honeycombed bureaucratic rubbish.
Well, give him a subject that makes him burn and he really boils over. And so you not only get a point for speaking as the whistle went, but an extra point for not being interrupted. Congratulations again. I now have to give you the final score because we have no more time to play Just a Minute. And Kenneth Williams, in spite of that round of style, panache, exuberance and passion, still finished in 4th place. Peter Jones was a little ahead of him. 1 ahead of Peter Jones was Tim Rice, and 2 ahead of Tim Rice was our winner, Clement Freud. Welcome. I think it's congratulations to all 4 of our contestants, particularly Tim Rice, who hasn't played the game as often as the others. I hope that you may be free to come back again sometime, Tim.
Well, if you insist. If you insist, I'd
Well,
like
it's not for me to insist, but I hope that they will ask you again. But I would like to say to our studio audience, thank you for joining us. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And we hope that you will tune in again when once more we take to the air and play Just a Minute. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
Thank you. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And we have 2 guests this week, Barry Crown and Lance Percival, against our 2 regulars, Kenneth Williams and Clement Freud. And once again, they're going to try and speak, if they can, on a subject that I will give them. And they will try and do it without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Let's begin the show with Kenneth Williams. And Kenneth, the subject, my following. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
It's interesting that I should be asked to discuss my following because it has made me something of a cult figure and has included such extraordinary personalities as Eli Passnocker and Gertrude Knobloch, who once said to me that her Uncle Harmon had left her shares which had brought in enormous numbers of dividends, but that they were entirely in hooks and eyes, and zip fasteners came in and ruined the market. Well, she said it
And
was...
Lance Percival has challenged.
I haven't understood a word, so there must be a deviation somewhere.
Well, I agree. He's deviated from his following. He's talking about hooks and eyes and dividends. So, Lance, I agree with your challenge of deviation. So you get a point for a correct challenge. You take over the subject. There are 32 seconds left, starting now.
My following consists of a fan club, which is organised by my mother because she's the only member of it. And we have free membership for anybody in this room who wishes to become a member.
And Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of member.
Yes, there were 2 members in your club after the one. There are 25 seconds left for you, Clement, having got the subject and a point on my following, starting now.
My following is actually of a proportion which made me come in so late on this round, because to name them all would have taken less than the number of seconds which were left. I would like to begin with Mr. and Mrs. Hill in the county of Suffolk on the north side of the mountain.
Excuse me, when the whistle went, which Ian Messiter blows to tell us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever speaks at that moment gets an extra point. It was, of course, Clement Freud, who has the lead naturally at the end of that round. And all I can say is he does seem to have some very boring followers, because it almost inhibited the audience. We go to the second round. Clement, will you begin it with the subject of after-dinner speaking? 60 seconds starting now.
Your Majesty, dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts, barons, the Lord Mayor, brigadier, colonel, major, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, corporal, and men of the 83rd Battalion of Foot, the Royal Ulster Rifles. It is with a deep sense of civic gratitude that I stand before you on this evening to argue that I am not too old to be President of the United States of America. Indeed, this has been done by a governor to whose seniority I bow by the extent of some 15 years, to put it mildly. And therefore, today, I would like you to consider the argument in favor of a democratic leadership of the Labour Party, or to put it another way, why don't you go home, eat up, and pay the waiter
I think that was one of the best after-dinner speeches I've ever heard, because it lasted exactly 1 minute. And you were not interrupted, Clement, so you get a point for speaking as the whistle went, but 1 extra point for keeping going for the full 60 seconds. Congratulations. And needless to say, you've increased your lead at the end of the round, and we now move to Barry Cryer. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And nice to hear from you. The subject is the last time I stood on my head. And you've got a fine head of hair on which to stand. So will you tell us something on the subject in 60 seconds, starting now?
Standing on the head, a basically unnatural procedure, is nevertheless one of the basic practices of yoga. Standing on one's head leads to the rush of blood to the aforementioned portion of the body, thereby leading to stimulation, and indeed a conducive element enters into this insofar as one feels refreshed and revivified by the very reversal of one's bodily posture. The last time I stood on my head was in a television studio, the purpose being not for yoga-esque activities, but for...
And Clement Freud is challenged.
I thought he said yoga, but he made it into yoga-esque, and he gets a point, and I'm sorry.
Yes. It was very cleverly done. You may be spotted in the audience.
Brilliant. I thought it was brilliant.
Yoga. Bless you. Marvellous. Marvellous, yes. And very clever of Clement to spot it, but and very generous of him to give it away, because he couldn't have any alternative, really, did he? 28 seconds. You've got a point, Barry, for a wrong challenge. You keep the subject. 28 seconds left. The last time I stood on my head, starting now.
Was indeed in a television studio to illustrate
and Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of was indeed in a television.
A lot of repetition, alas, and that's what happens when you're interrupted. Clement, you have the subject, and there are 26 and a half seconds. The last time I stood on my head, starting now.
The last time I stood on my head, I took tremendous trouble to make sure that my underwear was of the right degree of cleanliness and propriety, in case my trousers, which were loose at the time, fell below my...
Barry Cryer.
Deviation from the practical truth. One's trousers wouldn't fall down if you were upside down.
No, they'd fall up.
No, they fall down towards the ground. We who believe in gravity.
But how would they bypass your underpants, Clement? How would they bypass your underpants, thereby revealing them?
Yes, they couldn't.
They couldn't, Kenneth.
No, because you'd have the crutch, wouldn't you?
We speak of...
the crutch or crotch, as they say in the OED.
We're into the area of gussets here.
The gussets and the crotch, yes, you're
we
right,
are
Barry.
in an ongoing gusset situation.
Very clever of you to realise that, Barry. I think that's very bright. Very bright, don't you, Mr. Chairman?
Definitely, but I can't get a word in when you start going.
Well, I think you should congratulate our guest.
I can't, because you're speaking so much.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, Mr. Chairman.
I think it was a good challenge, yes. A very subtle one, but a good one. So we give it back to you, Barry, with 12 seconds to go. And the last time I stood on my head, starting now.
If you stand on your head, liquid held in your hand within a vessel will proceed to the floor. If the picture is then reversed on a television screen, therefore...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of television.
Yes.
I quite agree.
Yes, you were in a television studio before.
Quite agree.
The last time you were speaking. And Clement's got in with 2 seconds to go on the last time I stood on my head, starting now.
My ears became very red indeed.
And so, Clement Freud, as you realise, was speaking again as the whistle went and has increased his lead at the end of the round. And we're with Lance Percival now. And he's going to talk on Sinbad the Sailor in just a minute, starting now. Kenneth Williams is challenged.
Hesitation. I've never known anything so... I mean, you know, you could literally see his brain turning over, couldn't you? I mean, he's so slow. I think he's dropped off. Look at him.
As he's a guest and he hasn't been on the programme for a very long time, I think it's only fair to
very
say...
nice of you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're a very nice chairman. You're one of the few people with that kind of Christian generosity that was so lamentably lacking from today, isn't it? Yeah. You don't find many people like him about, do you? What did you say, just as well? That's very nice. He's doing his best.
Yes, I'm doing my best, and I'm going to give it to Lance Percival. It's a point, actually, for a wrong challenge there, Lance, and you still have the subject of Sinbad the Sailor, and 58.5 seconds to go, starting now.
Sinbad the Sailor comes from the Arabian Nights. He used to travel the world in boats telling the most dreadful, untrue stories, one of which was about Rock, which was a bird which he had on his shoulder, which was so big that he could go and eat elephants, or carry them at least. Now, on the other hand, there was an old man from the sea on his shoulder. He's supposed to have killed this old man. Never mind whether he was from the ocean or the other place I mentioned, but either of these stories are very unlikely to be true. The rest of the Arabian Nights I know nothing about, so I'm hoping that somebody will interrupt in a moment and say that I've...
Kenneth Williams has helped you out.
I would help out a friend, and he said he wants someone to buzz him, didn't he? So I come in quick, you know. I never let down a friend. I think you've got a duty, really, haven't you?
No. And what's your challenge, Kenneth?
Well, he was deviating by saying he wanted someone to buzz him.
No, he wasn't. He was repeating Arabian Nights.
Oh, I see. Yes, that's right. He was repeating Arabian Nights. That's right. It's very bright of you. You do see these things, don't you?
He also
very
said
quick.
On the other hand was an old man on his shoulder.
Yeah, that's right. He could have been on his shoulder and his hand.
Yes.
No.
Right.
Yeah. That one didn't went like a damp squib amongst the audience. 32 seconds. Kenneth, you've got a point, and you have the subject of Sinbad the Sailor starting now.
It's only me from over the sea, said Sinbad the Sailor. Come down before I knock down the door, said Sinbad the Sailor. And then she says, I'll come down and let you in, and I'll have a glass of gin, something like that. And then they get very, very tight together. And
Clement Freud has challenged. Clement has challenged you.
I think very, very tight.
Very, very tight, yes. You should have just been very tight.
Oh, I see.
Very, very tight. Unfortunately, his repetition in just a minute, and Clement, to silence, has the subject. And there are 11 seconds on Sinbad the Sailor, starting now.
I'm personally a Popeye man, never having gone much for Sinbad.
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
He's not pop-eyed at all. His eyes are quite all right, aren't they?
We'll give Kenneth...
Very good challenge.
Yeah.
A very good challenge. We give him a bonus point.
Thank you very much. I like all that.
In fact, even more, Clement has very generously said you can have the subject back again.
Thank you very much.
Because he doesn't want it any longer. So you have the subject back, you have another point for a wrong challenge, because Clement has given it to you, and you have 11 seconds, Sinbad the Sailor starting... Sorry, 6 seconds. 6 seconds. Only 6 seconds on Sinbad the Sailor starting now.
It's an interesting name because it's tautological, if you think. Sin, of course, is bad, and that is followed by the same word. Well, now that...
So Kenneth, speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point and has leapt forward into second place. He's 1 point ahead of our guests Barry Crowder and Lance Percival. Clement Freud is way out in the lead. Kenneth, it's your turn to begin. The subject, legs. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
My own have been the subject of admiration the world over. And when I produce them, as I've had to do, on more than one occasion, people have said to me, well, my goodness, your legs could make you a cult. I've become something of a cult figure because of the legs, you see.
Barry
Now-
Carr has challenged.
Repetition of cult.
Quite right, and Barry has the subject of legs, and there are 42 seconds left, starting now.
My legs were once described as few and far between. An understandable reaction. They are parallel. They produce a pleasing symmetry. They echo. They mirror each other and work as a fleshy team in the propulsion of my upper parts around this funny old tapestry we call Earth. I move on these appendages, at the bottom of which are situated what I like to call my feet. My feet are...
Clement Freud, your turn to begin the subject, how to make a fortune. Will you tell us in 60 seconds how to do that, please, starting now?
In this day and age, the best way of making a fortune is to invent something and then sell it so that no one else can produce it. I'm suggesting things like the everlasting light bulb and the self-sharpening razor, both of which have been discovered and then were flogged off, because I can't use the other word again, to commercial or industrial concerns who already had a patent permitting him to use those. But making an after-dinner speech is not a bad way of making a fortune. Your Majesty, dukes, marquises, earls, well, it did get a laugh last time. Flogging a dead horse is something I've always been exceedingly keen on doing. I knew a man who made an awful lot of money by reading the small print on an airline ticket, whereby he found that there were discounts to be had if you were a clergyman, blind, youthful, or travelled standby.
It doesn't often happen in one game that someone keeps going twice without being interrupted in just a minute. But Clement Freud has achieved that again, and so 2 points, 1 for speaking as the whistle went, 1 for not being interrupted, and he has increased his lead. Barry Carr, your turn to begin the subject, going to the dogs. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
Greyhound racing is not one of my predilections, but I have upon one occasion visited a stadium where the aforementioned activity took place, and I would like to relate an anecdote resulting from that evening's entertainment. I met 2 gentlemen who told me they had a partnership in one of the animals, but they had been acutely dismayed by its tendency to be unable to corner. In other words, it would run straight into the crowd. They were disturbed by this, that being a predilection of...
Lance Percival.
Repetition of predilection.
Yes, if you use that word, you're bound.
Only a little word.
Good. Yes, it's such a little word, yes. Stands out like a sore predilection, doesn't it?
Yes.
Lance, you had the subject. You have 30 seconds to keep going on, going to the dogs, starting now.
I go to the dogs every day because I possess 2 basset hounds, one of whom is called Raver and the other one is called Bella, and they neither run in a straight line nor round corners. They don't run at all. They find the latest tree and cock a leg upon it. That is their main occupation in life, except Bella, being a feminine bird, does not... The dog...
Kenneth Williams, a chance.
Hesitation there.
Yes, indeed. You were very generous before there were 3 or 4 runs there. They were running all over the place, your dogs.
Oh, yes, but they do.
Yes. Right, Kenneth, you got in with 12 seconds on going to the dogs, starting now.
They do this at Wembley, and they all follow this electric hair. I can never say electric, I say electric hair, because I always feel that...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of electric.
Yes. It was 2 electrics, 4 seconds, Clement, going to the dogs, starting now.
They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and have stripes black, red.
And Clement Freud was speaking once again as the whistle went and has increased his lead. It's Barry Carr's turn to begin, and it's Icarus. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Icarus, as is obvious, is the son of Daedalus. The 2 of them were imprisoned in the labyrinth by Minos or Minos. There are 2 schools of thought, and I was expelled from both of them. They were imprisoned therein, and the father of the pair.
And Lance Percival is challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, Lance,
That
I
was a
agree.
dramatic pause, actually, before I launched into the narrative. If you
very
could
dramatic,
sense the
and it
impetus I was building up there. Sad.
It is very sad, but alas, it is one of the rules of Just a Minute. So, Lance Percival, you have the subject of Icarus, and you have 36 seconds starting now.
Regardless of the pronunciation of the word M-I-N-O-S, because you can do it either way, the real problem with this particular name is that from the original Greek translation, it was Nicholas. Spelled K-N-I-C-K-E-R-L-E-S-S, which is one of the reasons why he couldn't fly too well, sun or no sun, with feathers on his arms. I found myself that without knickers it's absolutely impossible to go up in the air at all, ever. So I regard from now that unless I'm wearing briefs, I do not even go to London Airport. And therefore I'm hoping that some...
Barry Crowe has very obligingly challenged. Yes,
There
Barry.
was hesitation and
Definitely,
deviation and all
yes.
sorts of bumper
Yes,
bundles.
he'd take deviation, taking my name in vain, and 4 seconds for Icarus. With you, Barry, starting now.
The aforementioned gentleman headed for the sun, bearing upon his shoulders the wings coated
Kenneth
in...
Williams
I
challenge.
think as the chairman of this game, you should point out to your guest, Mr. Cryer, that he's allowed to repeat the subject as many times as he likes.
I would second
He
that.
keeps on saying the aforementioned as though he mustn't say the word Icarus. I mean, you should help him. He's your chairman, you know. You should help him.
It's not my job to interrupt him and then tell him what he can do. It's much better to let him go, and if he wishes to do it as cleverly and brilliantly as he does, why should I interrupt a genius in his flow?
It might get you a laugh.
So you get another point for being interrupted, Barry, and you have half a second on Icarus starting now. Well, our two guests gained a lot of points in that round. Clement Freud is still in the lead, and Lance Percival, your turn to begin. The subject, Waterfalls. Will you tell us something about those in the game starting now?
Waterfalls can be found all over the world, and the best way of looking at them is from the bottom end. The reason I say this is because I've often visited Niagara, which is halfway between America and Canada.
Clement Freud.
Deviation, he hasn't often visited it at all. He's only been there a couple of times. I mean, often means many times, doesn't it? Because you're popping over for the weekend all the time, doesn't it? I often go to Paris. You've been there every other weekend. But he hasn't only been there, what? How many times have you been there? Come on.
Twice last week.
Twice, Dave. That's all he's done, and he says often. I object to this, Mr. Chairman.
He
He's
said
showing
actually-
off. He's trying to wear the... I could feel he's some globetrotter, you know. Instead of ponies all over the place.
Well, I'm inclined to agree that you're probably correct. He doesn't
Yes, of
often
course I'm
go there.
correct.
So, Kenneth, you have the subject of Waterfalls. 49 seconds left, starting now.
They cascade down with this wondrous sound. Indeed, Wordsworth referred to it as trilling onomatopoeicism, which is delightful if you think about it. I mean, Wordsworths aren't born on trees, are they? You noticed how careful I was to add the plural there, so no one could accuse me of repeating myself. Oh, yes, I've got the old wits
Clement
about
Freud-
me.
Oh, sorry, Clement pressed his buzzer.
Oh, you pressed your button, did you? What's your challenge, mate?
Repetition.
Oh, well, he's got a point then.
A repetition of
Ha.
ha. You ha-ha'd. So, Clement has the subject of Waterfalls, and there are 31 seconds left, starting now.
When I went to Niagara Falls, which is halfway between Canada and America, or to put it another way, on the border, there was a restaurant in which I was served with a hot dog, which was dry and nasty. So I said to the waitress, "Do you have sauce?" And she replied, "HP," and I said, "No, I will pay cash." That's really all I wanted to
And Lance
say.
Percival's challenge.
Bit of hesitation there at the end.
And deviation, he got onto hot dogs and not waterfalls. There are 7 seconds for you, Lance, on Waterfalls starting now.
On the other hand, a lot of waterfalls do look like hot
Kenneth
dogs.
Williams.
Can't have waterfalls on your hand. What's the other about on your other hand?
I know.
The same man's the old man.
Yes. I disagree entirely. So you have another point, Lance, and there are 5 seconds on Waterfalls starting now.
The difficulty of getting over the top of the Niagara Falls is that if you get in
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of Niagara Falls.
Yes, you can say the subject on the card, but it's not Niagara Falls, unfortunately.
yeah, sorry.
So Clement's back in again with 1.5 seconds on Waterfalls starting now.
Waterfalls is the subject on the card.
And Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went and gained more points, increased his lead, but Lance is still strongly in second place, and Barry Cryer and Kenneth Williams in that order following. Kenneth, back with you to start. The subject, Hauntings. Will you tell us something about that spooky subject in 60 seconds, starting now?
Haunting chimes, haunting tunes, haunting pictures, haunting ectoplasms. Oh, yes, what manifestations are there here? And I once saw a person manifesting themselves on the bacon counter. And I took aside the manager and said, have you seen that? And he said, yes, it only occurs at Ash Wednesdays usually, because you see it's rumoured that the previous incumbent used to have a yen for streaky. And I said, what do you mean? And then I repeated the word. I can't do it now, you know what I mean. And he said, well, it took his fancy, and then did this terrible sort of slow wink, and it's sort of wall-eye look, you know. I thought, well, that's odd. I'm not coming back here because I don't want to feel that people around here with these strange proclivities...
Three uninterrupted rounds in one show. Kenneth Williams achieved it on that occasion, and magnificently, too.
So I've gone into the lead. I've gone into the lead, go on.
Yes.
I've got in the lead, you see. Yes.
You're leading Barry Cryer.
Yeah.
By 1 point. But you're still trailing behind Lance, Percival, and Clement Freud. And Clement begins the next round. The subject, the best put-down I ever heard. As long as it wasn't an after-dinner speech, we don't mind. So will you talk on that for 60 seconds, Clement, starting now?
The best put-down I ever heard was exceedingly short, as are all good put-downs. And in a game in which you have to waffle for 60 seconds, and best being not a word which one can conditionalize in any way, I will have to give you the build-up to this put-down in order that the short sentence with which I will end my speech may not be outside the rules of just a minute. It was a summer evening in Aberdeen. It was raining slightly, and the mist was coming down from the hills. And at the banqueting board in the Royal Station Hotel, the head waiter nudged the main speaker and said, functions are about to begin. It is up to you to open your mouth. And Mr. Gladstone, who was there on this occasion, was introduced at such very great length by so boring a man that when he was finally told, and now we come to the Prime Minister to give his address, the aforementioned gentleman said, 10 Downing Street.
Well, Clement Freud kept going not only for a minute, he kept going for 70 seconds, because we wanted to hear the payoff, which he cleverly managed to put in after the 60, and we didn't blow the whistle until 70 was up. So, Clement, well done. You gained an extra point, of course, for speaking as the whistle went and keeping going without being interrupted. 4 uninterrupted rounds in one show, a great achievement in just a minute, and the final score, because we have, alas, reached the end of the show. Barry Cryer, coming from previous triumphs, finished in a very strong 4th place. Kenneth Williams, just slipping a little from previous great pinnacles of achievement, came 1 ahead of him. Lance Percival, returning after his exuberance in previous appearances, finished in a strong 2nd place, but there was no doubt about the winner. It was Clement Freud. Congratulations to our winner and all the other competitors. We hope you've enjoyed the show and will want to tune in again. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
Present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Barry Took and Tim Brooke-Taylor in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, our four intrepid experts at the game, or two experts and two guests, Tim Brooke-Taylor and Barry Took, our guests, are going to try and speak, if they can, on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do it without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Peter Jones, will you begin the show this week? And the subject is enough money. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Well, of course, it depends what your needs are. Some people require more than others because they desire very expensive and elaborate lives which involve yachts and expensive hotels, rich wine and food and clothing that comes from very...
And Barry Took is challenged.
Yes.
Why?
I haven't the faintest idea. The poor chap seemed to be floundering a bit.
Well, that would be a hesitation, Barry, as you're fairly new to the game. Yes.
I've written it down, but I can't read my own writing.
Yes. Hesitation.
And the subject is...
The subject is enough money, and there are 38 seconds left, and you start now.
Well, if I had enough money...
And can...
I've distinctly heard an
There's definitely one. Yes.
I was surprised at Barry Took, as a matter of fact, I'd expected better. I mean, after all, he has been on it before.
Barry Took has challenged you.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Deviation.
Oh, quite right. Exactly, quite right, yeah.
No, so, Kenneth, no, you had a correct challenge. You get a point, of course, for the correct challenge. You take over the subject, which is enough money, and there are 36 seconds left, starting now.
There is an old expression prevalent in this country, and all who occupy the region will be aware of it. Love or money. I wouldn't have it for, and then this expression is repeated. I can't, of course...
Tim Brooke-Taylor has challenged.
Repetition expression.
Yes.
What a You're very sharp. He's sharp, isn't he? He's very sharp, yes. Very
That's
well
why we asked him on the programme. So, Tim. You and Barry challenged again. It's more profitable challenge in the actual rounds, actually.
Yeah, quite right. No, he's got to keep Audrey's the chairman. It's a lovely job he does. Very wrong to challenge him. He's a marvellous
in
chairman.
Your favour, yes.
Very
right.
good. And quite good looking, too.
It doesn't work on radio. There are 24 seconds for you, Tim, to take over the subject of enough money, starting now.
Enough money is an impossible subject to discuss with a child who wants pocket money. Should it be index-linked? In which case, what should it be tied up with? In my day, it was a bar of chocolate, which cost 3D. Now, a modern child would choose something that would be more expensive than this. For example, he would want a yacht, or he would want a motorboat, or this is what my...
And Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of he would want.
Yes.
You've heard my child.
And you've got in cleverly, Peter, with 2 seconds to go on enough money, and you start now.
Some people never do have it.
When Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. Peter Jones did just that, and at the end of the round, he is one ahead of all the others. Kenneth, will you take the second round? The subject, what I like best. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
What I like best is a bracing walk along the front with the briny air in the nostrils, and then what more delicious than a plate of cockles at Southend-on-Sea, washed down, if you can get it, with a drop of milk stout. On to smoked haddock Monte Carlo. What a delicious concoction this represents! It's almost impossible to describe the flavours that pass across the palate, even as it's touching my sensitive chords and taste buds.
Barry took a challenge. Barry, what's your challenge?
I thought I had to. He was going red in the face. I mean, it is a bit of a puzzle when you're sitting next to him.
I know, it's illustrated. So we give Barry Took a bonus point for rescuing Kenneth from a fate worse than death. But, Kenneth, you have to continue because you didn't actually deviate in any of the faults of the game. So you have 18 seconds to continue on What I Like Best, and Tim has challenged now.
He's still red in the face. I'd like a point for rescuing him.
Tim's a guest. Give him a point as well. All right. So there are 18 seconds for you, Kenneth, on What I Like Best. But one to Kenneth, because it was a wrong challenge, starting now.
What I like best is the company of civilized people who have gentle, well-modulated tones and who speak almost as beautifully as...
Peter Jones is challenged.
Well, he won't find them at Southend. If he likes Southend best, he can't
You're
then
right,
say that
Peter,
he
you are right. So, Peter's got in this time with 2.5 seconds to go.
He's just cheated. He's just in the last 2 seconds. I mean, that is disgraceful, isn't it? Don't you agree? Just in on the last 2 seconds. I said, actually, even look at him. He's gone white. He knows he's done wrong.
Because Clement Freud is not here to get in just with 2 seconds to go, Peter Jones is achieving it. Peter, the subject, What I Like Best, starting now.
Well, I like Penzance.
And Barry challenged. Why did you challenge Barry?
Well, I don't like Penzance.
Oh.
Of the two, I prefer Southend, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate challenge.
I think it's an illegitimate challenge, but thank you very much for your contribution.
You're very welcome.
And, Peter, you continue with 1 second, What I Like Best, starting now.
Chocolate ice cream.
At the end of that round, including getting a point for speaking as the whistle went, you might be not surprised to hear that Peter Jones has leapt forward and has a strong lead. All the rest have 2 and Peter 6 ahead. Tim Brooke-Taylor, will you begin the next round? The subject, my best conjuring trick. Whether you have any or not, I don't know. It doesn't matter, and don't look shocked or offended. So we start the watch on time, I say.
Sorry, Nicholas, do you want to do the subject or not?
I've just done it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
How many did I get?
The only reason, because Ian Messenger is a little deaf, he's getting on, you see. I have to say start now so he can press the nipple on the watch at that particular moment.
The nipple?
So,
Did Nicholas Parton say nipple?
Yeah.
I think I can die happy. Nicholas.
But not for half an hour or
not
so.
Not for half an hour, okay.
As someone who was an engineer before I was an actor, there are plenty of nipples in the engineering world. And there's a nipple on this watch here. The subject was my best conjuring trick, starting now.
My best conjuring trick involves a comparatively empty cylinder. At least it appears that to the audience, from which I produce flags of all the nations. Portugal, Spain, Germany, Italy, Belgium, France, Great Britain, United States of America, Canada, Bolivia, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Russia, Norway, Finland.
Deviation, this is just a list of places. I mean, nothing to do with conjuring. Surely it's supposed to be about conjuring, isn't it?
Well,
where did conjuring come in to just recite a lot of places?
I've got to describe the trick.
What?
Flags of all the nations. I've got to describe all the flags that I'm putting...
You weren't actually describing the flags. You were then going through a list of flags, and you were no longer describing your best conjuring trick. You were just listing the flags. So I
haven't seen it. How can you possibly...
I don't think you've ever seen it either.
And after that, I don't want to see it.
I think Kenneth's challenge was legitimate.
Oh, outrageous, just because he normally plays this game. That is outrageous.
He doesn't play it normally. He plays it very...
He said nipple and made me laugh. I'm really upset.
Kenneth, you have 30 seconds on my best conjuring trick starting now.
It is to produce a hard-boiled egg from, apparently, someone else's coat, but, in fact, it comes from my own...
Tim Brooke-Taylor's challenge.
I wasn't even started. I was hardly
He
underway.
has challenged you, Tim.
It was the coming from that seemed to be repeated.
Yes.
Comes from.
Yes, he did. I'm so sorry, Kenneth. So Tim has the subject back again, another point.
Ooh, I wish I hadn't now. Ooh.
Well, 18 seconds on my best conjuring trick starting now.
The reason I now perform in the comedic field is because I was first a conjurer, and like a lot of entertainers, my conjuring tricks went completely wrong. I could produce 4 aces, but I couldn't. In fact, they came out as 2 queens, 2 aces, and I said
and
aces.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition of 2.
And aces.
Yes, and aces as well.
Far too many aces there in your hand,
Yes.
Tim. There are 4.5 seconds, Peter, for you.
He's doing it again!
Oh, yes.
Oh, hate.
On my best conjuring trick starting now.
Well, I put a pound note inside a balloon, and then I blow it up, and I...
If he'd had the chance, I'd have got him on deviation. He's never put a pound note in a balloon in his life. Never get a pound note off him, let alone anything else. Got a burglar alarm on the dustbin, that one, I can tell you.
Peter Jones was again speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so, and has increased his lead. Barry Took, will you begin the next round? The subject is reviews. Can you tell us something about those in the game starting now? Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
Yeah, what happened, Barry? It was a silent review, was it? Because there was 2 seconds. I'm afraid, even though you are a guest, is somebody working?
He's got laryngitis. He's pretending his voice has gone.
Tim has challenged.
I'd like to say he was doing an impersonation of Marcel Marceau doing a review. I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Yes, but it's not very good radio, unfortunately. I've never seen...
Why change the habit of a lifetime, Nicholas?
He's just working out some gags for the next series of the goodies. Kenneth, you have the subject with 58 seconds. Reviews starting now.
I had the most wonderful experience in puzzle entertainment when I came on in this monk's habit and had to...
Barry Took is challenged.
Had to... Well, I did this
Hesitation. Barry. So you have the subject back of reviews, and there are 49 seconds left starting now.
Share my letters. Pieces of 8. 1 over the...
Tim Brooke-Taylor challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes. Tim has the subject. There are 45 seconds. The subject is reviews, and Tim, you start now.
Nicholas Parsons is appalling, boring, self-satisfied, and smug, is my opinion.
Barry Cryer challenged.
No, I didn't.
He's not Barry Cryer. What are you
Not
doing?
by any stretch.
What a chairman. Can't even get the names right. What a chairman.
Goes to pieces under criticism, doesn't it? You notice? Yeah.
I was so shattered, I suddenly thought that it was my friend Barry Cryer crying out for help.
You've got all your cards wrong. They ought to give him his cards, this one.
So, Barry Took, what is your challenge?
Well, I'll challenge that I'm not Barry Cryer. Although right now I'm having severe doubts about that as well. But I think he was deviating, going off about you when he should have been going on about review or reviews.
This was one of the reviews that would hurt an ego of an actor, is what I was going on to say.
But actually,
Well, you
Tim...
never got that far.
Tim, it wasn't...
Well, I must be allowed to finish the sentence.
It wasn't actually a review.
It was
No, it was not a review.
I read it
a review
last
is
week.
A review is a review of a person's performance.
I could produce the piece of paper if you wanted. I didn't want to have to mention this, Nicholas.
No, it was a comment of a journalist.
Well, that is a review of a programme.
It was not reviewing the
Look,
programme.
could we get on? My pills are beginning to wear off.
I think it was a thinly veiled insult.
Job to go to.
Barry Took, you have the subject of reviews again, and there are 40 seconds starting now.
I was in a review called For Amusement Only, and another one with adults in the title. What a cast they were in those days. Ron Moody, Hugh Paddock, Thelma Ruby, Pat Lancaster, Jimmy Thompson, Vivian Martin.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition. He's just repeating the names of the cast.
Well, it wasn't a repetition of. You wasn't repeating any words. so he's entitled to continue. And there are 27 seconds left, starting now.
Well, what was that about the flag?
Hesitation, I'm afraid.
Yes,
Hesitation.
it was. Kenneth, you have the subject to review. 25 seconds, starting now.
I went to one of the shows that Danny has just discussed and loved it when a girl came on a la pantomime and cried, "Here's the piano in the wood, a song and dance will do us good." My laughter rang through the auditorium, and when afterwards I visited them backstage because I was a well-loved and trusted old chum.
So Kenneth Williams was speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point and other points in the round, and has leapt forward into second place, just behind Peter Jones. Our guests, Barry Took and Tim Brooke-Taylor, are trailing equal just behind, and Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject, my flamenco dancing. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
Well, it's something I indulge in private. Early in the morning, I wake up, and fortunately I always keep a pair of castanets.
Tim Brooke-Taylor has challenged you.
That's not deviation. I'd like to know what is.
What, waking up?
No, doing this early in the morning in his own privacy. I find that's the most devious thing I've ever heard.
I imagine it's the way you do it, actually, Tim.
You can imagine all you like, Nicholas, but...
So I don't think he was technically deviating from the subject on the card, you see, and that's really the rules of the game. So Peter keeps the subject, and there are 52 seconds, my flamenco dancing, starting now.
The castanets are under the pillow, and my wife is next to me, and I invite her.
Tim Brooke-Taylor's challenge.
Hesitation.
I agree with that, yes, Tim. So you have the subject this time with 47 seconds on my flamenco dancing, starting now.
My flamenco dancing is a grave disappointment to my family. The original reason for flamenco dancing, and I hesitated on myself, and I'm going to die.
Well, hesitation.
Yes, and if you hadn't drawn attention to it, you might have let you keep going. Peter, you have 32 seconds on my flamenco dancing, starting now.
My spouse is a consenting adult, and we stand by the bedroom window, having opened it. We breathe in, and we start stamping around with this flamenco dancing to the accompaniment of a gramophone record, which is now worn almost thin by constant repetition. And I do find that... Listen...
Yes, hesitation. His flamenco was really running down, wasn't it? Kenneth, you have 8 seconds on my flamenco dancing, starting now.
Flamenco dancing is best done with flamencos, and what you do is get out of the feathers, because they're birds.
Tim Brooke-Taylor's challenge.
What are flamencos? That is deviation if ever I heard.
Yes.
I'd like to see
He's got me on his legitimate point. It's a legitimate point.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, you can't deny he's
It's better with a flamingo, actually, than a
That's
flamenco.
what I was getting mixed up with. You're right. You caught me out. You're very clever.
Yes, I knew what you were trying to say, but I'm afraid Tim got in there with 3 seconds to go on my flamenco dancing, starting now.
Killing the...
And Barry took his challenge.
Hesitation, I'm afraid. Hesitation, I'm afraid.
My
learned leader has so wisely pointed out.
Yes. Right, so you have the subject.
You're not seriously going to accept that challenge.
You can't argue the chairman. You're just running the game. You've only been here 1 week. It's a disgrace.
I told my children to respect the referee. The referee is always right. I hope they're not listening to this program.
Right. It was 1.5 seconds without uttering a sound, Tim.
No, it wasn't. You hear it back. Those people that taped it at home. Was Nicholas Parsons lying, or was he a nipple?
Barry, you have 1.5 seconds on my flamenco dancing, starting now.
My first expression
is
hesitation without any... My flamenco... Have I started yet?
1 second.
Oh, come on, Nicholas, don't be silly. It's
starting
getting serious.
now.
Flamenco dancing is... And may I add, Mr. Chairman, Olé.
No wonder people are leaving this program in droves. Oh.
Well, at the end of that round, it's becoming a very even contest. Peter Jones is still in the lead, but he's closely followed now by Barry Took and Kenneth Williams, and only 1 point behind them lies Tim Brooke-Taylor. And Kenneth, your turn to begin. The subject, news. Can you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
There have been incredible pieces about this, you know, bringing the good news from A to Ghent and how it flashed across the telegraph wires when Marconi did that incredible bit of inventing and in the process conveyed such news as was to be incriminating.
Barry Took has challenged you.
I thought you were slowing down on Freud.
He was.
Which was to be incriminating. They caught the murder.
Yes, if you'd gone any slower, it would have been hesitation. You've got about as slow as anybody
Why don't you
could go.
shut your great mouth?
And this is the person he described as a superb chairman a moment ago.
Oh, well, I must have been out of my head.
Don't change the subject, Kenneth.
Kenneth, you can only just keep going, but but there are 37 seconds on news starting now.
And once I conveyed news by calling out Star News Standard and then Figaro. And I sang this so beautifully that people said, how amazing! Your vocal control is extraordinary. That is news in itself. Who was I to differ? I agree. Of course, wholeheartedly, I was with them. But news in the sense that we open a paper and think, what new scandal will be unfurled today? What outrageous...
So Kenneth Williams started with the subject, and in spite of being interrupted in the middle, still continued to the end and kept it throughout. So, Kenneth, you got 2 points in that round. You're now in second place ahead of Barry Took and Tim Brooke-Taylor. Peter Jones in the lead, and Tim to begin the next round. The subject, arithmetic. Will you tell us something about that in the game, Tim, starting now?
Arithmetic, is that quick enough for you? Arithmetic, I've repeated arithmetic, I'm allowed to repeat arithmetic as I've done it. It's a subject I taught in a school at one stage. I knew very little about it. I stood by the blackboard and set myself about this.
Barry Took his challenge.
Well, if Tim doesn't know why I challenge, nobody does.
The chairman's quite clearly
well,
on
you
your
better say
side.
something.
Yes, he deviated, and he didn't deviate at all. He hesitated and was rather lackluster about the whole thing.
Yeah, he was lackluster. He stumbled over a word.
He stumbled over, that's the very phrase I was speaking.
Yes, but he didn't actually come to a complete pause, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt, as I gave Barry the benefit of the doubt. So, Tim, I try to be fair, as you see. You keep the subject. There are 47 seconds on arithmetic starting now. And that, Peter.
Definite hesitation.
That was
there.
definite, I'm sorry.
You're not sorry at all. Look at him. He's not...
This game is like spending 30 minutes in a spin drive.
How would you know?
You don't know my deviation.
I do
Don't
now.
repeat them here, please.
I'm awfully sorry. Speaking as Barry Cryer, I'd like to say it's a disgrace.
He's the one in the beard.
Yes. He's been with us before, and he will come again. There are 44 seconds on arithmetic. Arithmetic is the subject, and Peter Jones has it, and he starts now.
Arithmetic is one of those things that lots of people boast they're not good at, like telling lies and burgling. I don't know why it is, but they do tend to believe that other people will be impressed with some spiritual quality if they confess that mathematics is beyond them. I don't know why that is. It's always baffled me because
Tim Brooke-Taylor has challenged.
Deviation onto mathematics is a much broader subject.
It's a much broader subject, but he can still go on. Arithmetic is part of mathematics, and he was progressing.
Well, it can go into totally different areas. That's fair.
He was not deviating, in my mind, from the subject of arithmetic. A very good attempt, Tim. But
Thank you.
I leave it with Peter, with 22 seconds left, starting now.
thank heavens we are blessed with a chairman who has a brilliant mathematical mind and is able to juggle the figures in favor of whichever participant in the game he selects that particular evening.
Tim Brooke-Taylor challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, he was stumbling over his words, and we call that hesitation. So, Tim, you have it. Again, arithmetic, 7.5 seconds, starting now.
Spot the deliberate mistake, and the pupils would look up at the sum that I had done on the board and desperately to try to find out what I'd actually...
I desperately dread to reply.
Yes.
I will put that down as a certain element of hesitation.
Yes, definitely, Barry. And you have the subject with 2 seconds on arithmetic starting now.
I feel that arithmetic is one of the most noble of all things.
So Barry Took, speaking as the whistle went, gained the extra point. He's now equal with Kenneth Williams. They are 5 points behind our leader, Peter Jones, and Tim is only 1 point behind them. And Barry Took, will you begin the next round? The subject is Letters I Love. Will you tell us something about them in 60 seconds, starting now?
The letters I love most have money in them, or contracts. Praise comes high on my list, and loves and lives and other people's experiences that come flooding in on this wonderful television program that I have the honor to present, Points of View. No home should be without it, every week, enjoying the airwaves, making mischief and nonsense out of serious subjects, being criticised deeply by the punters who actually pay their licence fees to the BBC is quite interesting, because...
Peter Jones has challenged you.
Deviation.
Of course. Letters I Love, he's going off about his programme, deviation from the game, from the subject.
But I love everything.
From radio, from everything.
Good heavens.
Dare you promote another programme when you're playing just a minute? Oh.
It was really verging on an ego trip, wasn't it?
It was deviation from Letters I Love. So there are 30 seconds for you, Peter Jones, on Letters I Love, starting now.
The letters I love are mostly ones that have never yet arrived, and I'm still waiting for them. Congratulations from Nancy Banks-Smith and all the people at The Guardian. I've never had a kind word from that woman since I started in this business so long ago. Other letters that I look forward to receiving are congratulations from Billy Cotton Jr. and perhaps something from the Queen. And who else can I think
And
of?
Tim Brooke-Taylor's challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, there were a number of those there, yes.
Well, that was a mark of respect for the sovereign.
Yes. It's rather strange as you mentioned the Queen and then you erred. There are 2 seconds with you, Tim. You got in just before the whistle. Letters I Love, starting now.
The letter would be, please come and accept them.
And we have reached the end of the round and the end of the contest, unfortunately, because we've enjoyed playing it in spite of all the banter that goes on. We've had a good time. We hope you have. I'll tell you the final score. It was very interesting. Our 2 guests, Tim Brooke-Taylor and Barry Took, came equal with Kenneth Williams in second place. 3 seconds, 1 winner, Peter Jones. They all contributed their usual good value in entertainment, talent and rudery, and we do hope you've enjoyed it all, and we'll want to tune in again the same time next week when we take to the air and we play Just a Minute. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Peter Jones and Amy MacDonald in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've heard from our announcer, we welcome as our guest this week Amy MacDonald, who's very courageously come along to do battle with our three wicked, outrageous and intrepid exponents of Just a Minute. And they will try and speak, if they can, for 60 seconds on the subject that I will give them, and do it as usual without hesitation, repetition or deviation. And let us start the show with Kenneth Williams, and let's start with a subject dear to his heart: having women in the show. Kenneth, will you talk on that subject in the game starting now?
Having women in the show is essential if you want that peculiar grace and charm that only the ladies can bring to any atmosphere. And when you come to pantomime, ask yourself, what would you do without the women in the show? Be it the lovely chorus, be it Cinderella.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of lovely.
Yes.
Oh, well.
I think it really is a lovely answer. Right, Clement, there are 42 seconds left, and can you tell us something about having women in the snow? I'm sorry, that cold thought rather warmed them up. I didn't... it's having women in the show, and not literally either. 42 seconds to go on it, starting now.
I think this is the first time in the 11 or 12 years in which I've taken part in Just a Minute that I've been instructed by the chairman not to take a subject literally.
Amy MacDonald has challenged.
Darling, he's been talking for hours and he hasn't even mentioned the subject. What's that all about?
I haven't the idea, yes. I think probably, Amy.
I don't think we ought to have women in the show.
And Clement has given me the answer. We give Clement a bonus point for that nice comment, but give the subject to Amy for her challenge, so she gets a point for having a correct challenge, and you take over the subject with 32 seconds left on having women in the show, starting now.
Well, I'm only ever here when there are women in the show. And I simply cannot imagine the show without these female species in it. Because women have this wonderful way of speaking, you see, without boring people to death.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Don't think they do.
It can happen that you can be equally bored by a woman as by a man, Sir Peter.
Quite right.
I agree with your challenge, and you have 15 seconds to take over the subject of having women in the show, starting now.
I'd like to welcome Amy MacDonald as a woman.
Clement Freud is challenged. And Clement...
that was a hesitation
yes.
on...
So he did stumble and hesitate, so 13 seconds are left for you, Clement, on having women in the show, starting now.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to oppose this motion as strongly as I possibly can. Having women in the show is one of the most monumental wastes of time, both on the part of the audience as the other...
No, Amy MacDonald challenged just before the whistle.
Well, it's absolute rubbish, isn't it?
Absolute deviation.
Apart from anything else, it's rude.
Yes, I think that does put your finger right on it there, but the challenge, rude or not, because we are rude in this game, alas, Amy, and it is difficult sometimes if you are a woman. There is half a second for you, having got in just before the whistle, to talk on having women in the show, starting now.
It's a wonderful idea.
When Ian Messenger blows his whistle, it does tell us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. And as you realise, it was Amy MacDonald, and with the subject of women in the show, she has the lead at the end of the first round, alongside Clement Freud, the man who resents having women in the show. Peter Jones, will you take the second subject, which is how to say no? Now, Amy MacDonald is sitting beside you. Don't get overwhelmed by it this time, but talk on the subject if you can, starting now.
Well, I think one has to say it firmly, showing tremendous consideration and sensitiveness for the people one is saying it to. Some people say no. In this way, they say yes.
Amy MacDonald challenge.
Oh, that was hesitation.
It was.
No, that wasn't hesitation.
It was an illustrative.
It was a demonstration.
It was a demonstration, but your demonstration included pausing, which unfortunately you can't do in just a minute. It's awfully difficult, isn't it?
You're going to sit there and take that? You're going to sit there and take it? That's going to fight in you. Haven't you got any guts in you, Jones? I mean, what you was doing, a perfectly legitimate thing, you were elongating your vowel, right?
No.
Many people do that. They go, yeah.
And that's...
Perfectly reasonable. There was no pausing. You didn't pause. Stand up yourself.
Quite right.
First of all, Peter Jones does know how to say no, and that particular diatribe came from the man who's got the most elongated vowels in the whole of show business. Amy, I agree with the challenge. You have 46 seconds to talk on how to say no, and we would like it from a woman now, so it's going to be great fun, starting now.
There are very many different ways of saying no, depending on the circumstances under which you have to say that little word. You might say, please don't do that now, or I...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Hesitation or pause?
No.
Oh, of course not, no.
Of course not.
No.
The audience paused in stunned amazement. Please don't do that now. They all wanted to know when. 33 seconds on how to say no. Still with you, Amy, starting now.
You could say, I really...
Clement Freud, challenged again.
Did I?
Yes.
We shouldn't have women on the show.
It's good a challenge as
Spoils
any,
it.
but as it doesn't apply in the game, I'm afraid that's another point to Amy with 31 and a half seconds on how to say no, starting now.
I really would prefer it if you didn't do that, which is a much nicer way of saying, please don't do it. No, in other words. I say no.
Kenneth Williams,
Oh, that was a bit of hesitation
Yes,
there.
I lost my
There was more than a bit.
There was hesitation there, yes.
Yes, it was more than a bit. Kenneth, you have the subject of how to say no, and there are 21 seconds starting now.
Well, on the other side of the Atlantic, they frequently say the answer is in the negative, or at this time I do not have total recall, and all kinds of other versions of it. Whereas Peter Jones rightly pointed out, diplomacy is the greatest asset you can possess when that appalling verdict happens.
Well, it does seem that Kenneth Williams seems to drag his fan club in, because when he speaks as the whistle goes, he gets...
drag.
No, they're very respectably dressed. None of them in drag today. Kenneth got a point for speaking when the whistle went as well, so he is now in third place. 1 point behind Clement Freud, and Amy MacDonald's in the lead, and Clement, your turn to begin. The subject, port. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
One of the less important things about port is that the decanter moves to the left. When you sit at dinner and the butler asks the wine waiter to bring you the container cut of crystal or whatever other glass it may be, you have to turn it to what in naval terms is the opposite of starboard. It is, of course, a reinforced wine which comes from Portugal, and of all the delicious after-dinner drinks, I cannot think of one that compares with it, unless I mention...
Amy MacDonald was challenged.
That is boring, isn't he,
I don't know, I thought I thought he actually had the audience in the hollow of his hand.
Oh, give it
there.
to her.
No,
We ought to have more women on the show.
No, you weren't deviating on this occasion, Clement. You were really sticking to port there. And there are 19 and a half seconds on port starting now.
Cognac, Armagnac, liqueurs of whatever country they may emanate from, which includes France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Denmark, Sweden.
Peter Jones has challenged.
I don't think you can compare a fortified wine with a spirit. Fairly.
Yes, but he was talking, the subject was port, and since he started again, he's not mentioned port, he's mentioned nearly every other afternoon.
Oh, are you
drink.
challenging now? Perhaps we can get the producer and the sound recording man.
Well, I
a
dare
real
say they all...
gangbang of it.
They all... I think they all have an opinion to contribute.
Good. Give
Peter
him a few
Jones
points. Give him a few points, then.
There are 7 seconds for you, Peter, on the subject of port, starting now.
Bournvita and Ovaltine, let alone a glass of hot milk, are delightful drinks to have after...
So Peter Jones got the extra point, speaking as the whistle went. He's now in third place, ahead of Kenneth Williams. Clement is ahead of them, but Amy MacDonald is still in the lead, and she is taking the next subject, which is getting out of an awkward situation. No, sorry, I misread it. Getting out of an awkward position. There's a subtle difference. That's the subject that Ian Mester has thought of. Will you talk on it for 60 seconds if you can, starting now?
Depending on the position you are in is a very sort of strange way of getting out of it, if you know what I mean. You could be practicing yoga. You could be standing on your head. And if you are, you could be feeling very uncomfortable and so want to get out of that awkward position, whereby you would roll your body down, ankles first, slowly to the floor, lowering your buttocks down thereupon, and sweeping up into the sitting position. Then you might
Peter Jones, the last challenge. Yes, Peter.
Hesitation.
Well, he was making me laugh.
No, I wasn't making you laugh.
Yes,
no.
you were. I could feel you.
I'm what an awful thought. If you feel Peter Jones, you laugh.
Well, his chair was shaking. I could feel him doing that.
I was worried about people listening who might get into trouble trying to do as you were describing.
Yes.
Particularly children, you know, like when they go to see Peter Pan, they jump off mantelpieces and things like that. I thought there'd be people tied up all over the country.
Peter, I agree with your challenge, so you have 16 seconds to talk on getting out of an awkward position, starting now.
Yes, if, for instance, you're standing astride a barbed wire fence, it can be extremely difficult to move in either direction. It's wisest, if you can, to have a friend standing by who'll be able to lift one leg.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of standing.
Yes, there's a bit too much standing in that one. So Clement's got in with 1.5 seconds to go on getting out of an awkward position, starting now.
There are 4 good directions.
So Clement Freud getting an extra point as the whistle spoke has gone forward and is now in the lead with Amy MacDonald and Kenneth Williams. Will you begin the next round? The subject, contemplation. You look very contemplative at the moment, and will you talk on the subject if you can, starting now?
Contemplation, if only a little more contemplation was indulged in by the leaders of the nations in the world, what a much better place it would be. In the words of that great sage who uttered the famous lines, the old order changeth yielding place to new, and the everlasting fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. Comfort thyself what comes to...
Peter Jones is challenged.
I'm just thinking...
Of a challenge?
Yes. My first impulse was to stop him.
You were being generous, were you?
Yes.
Well, Peter, shall we give you a bonus point for a very nice challenge, but as it doesn't in the rules of the game, leave the subject with Kenneth Williams, who gets a point for interruptions, of course, and he continues with 23 seconds on contemplation, starting now.
For it was long ago remarked by an ancient divine that all the public know of a subject is
the reputation of that aforementioned article. To contemplate your navel is one of the philosophical attitudes described.
So, Kenneth Williams, starting with the subject, finished with the subject in spite of interruptions, which of course gave him points throughout, including one for speaking as the whistle went. So he is now in second place, equal with Peter Jones. Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject, the Oregon Trail. Can you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
Oh, that wonderful, clean, umbrageous state north of California, home of the giant redwoods, where one of them has actually been hollowed out and you can drive a horse and cart right through this huge tree. What a lovely place it is. And the way to it, of course, is along the Oregon Trail, where the pioneers who first opened up the western part of
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, there was a definite there, Peter, and so Clement Freud has the Oregon Trail, and there are 31.5 seconds starting now.
What I remember particularly well about a book called The Oregon Trail was the people ate each other. And cannibalism, together with incest and arson, are things which shouldn't be discussed on a family program such as this, but I'm prepared to make an exception on this occasion. They came by trailer in the latter part of the 19th century, ran out of supplies, and discovered that the only way in which they could feed themselves was on the flesh of each other.
So Clement Freud finished with the subject, gets an extra point for doing so, and he has now taken the lead ahead of Amy MacDonald, with Peter Jones and Kenneth Williams just a little behind.
How else can you take the lead other than ahead of?
Well, to take the lead, you have to go ahead.
Yeah,
and that's what I was trying to convey. And if, under the pressure of the moment and the tension and all the sour looks that I get from you and everybody else, which gives me under tremendous pressure to keep going and not to try and hesitate, deviate, so forth. If I make a grammatical error, I know the audience are on my side. I was guilty of that thing that tautology, isn't it, Ian? Is that
Tautology.
right? Tautology. Tautology, right. The next subject, Clement Freud, is archaic practices. It's your turn to begin, and would you please start now?
One of the strangest and most archaic practices with which I have come face to visage is in the House of Commons, where when they remove the nail brushes from the gentleman's cloakroom. And I've never quite understood why, but the moment the chamber is prorogued, the gentleman in charge...
Peter Jones challenged.
The chamber is what?
Prorogued. It's a word they use in Parliament which nobody understands, nor do they, but they go on using it, hoping that no one will ever find out. But he was actually being correct. So he's proroguing away there, and there are 36 seconds, 37 actually, archaic practices, Clement, starting now.
Simon.
Kenneth Williams. Yes. He actually prorogued too long, didn't he, then? So, Kenneth, you have 35.5 seconds on archaic practices starting now.
One that I particularly enjoy is this bloke who cries out, "Oh, yay, oh, yay."
And
There's not what you can do it, is there?
Amy MacDonald.
He's archaic and he has to do it, doesn't he?
Yes,
I knew you were going to do that, darling.
Yeah, you're wonderful. You're telepathic, you are.
Yeah. Well, she picked you up very rapidly there and put you down again equally quickly. There are 29.5 seconds for you, Amy, on archaic practices starting now.
There is an archaic practice that is still going on, and I'm not quite sure I really understand why. It pertains somewhat to the subject we had before, Clement Freud's port. People still drink port after...
And Clement Freud has challenged.
What?
On what? Port. You see, port was
You're
a subject
allowed to
before.
say
But that's not on the card. That was on the other
It
card.
was on the card earlier.
Yeah, but you can't use another word from another card, you know.
Can't you?
You're
In
going
this
to see
round.
another show. It's the same show, darling.
In this round, the subject is archaic practices, which you can repeat, but not port, which was another round. I'm sorry, Amy. But I have to be fair, otherwise I might get 6 letters.
What? Is this a change of policy?
No? I'm sorry, I missed that one. Clement, I am being fair and against my inclinations, which are towards Amy, giving you the subject, and you have 15.5 seconds, archaic practices, starting now.
One of the most archaic practices is getting out of an awkward position. And
Peter Jones has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, indeed, yes. He got himself into an awkward position then, and there are 5 seconds for you, Peter, to take over archaic practices starting now.
Well, I don't know a great deal about them because...
Well, if you don't know anything about it, why don't you shut up?
You know, in all the years this game's been going, he said that so many times and you still laugh.
Always worth the point.
When I was in the middle of a very fluent piece of oratory, he said that it was so boring it would be shut up.
So it was.
How dare you? I've come all the way from Great Portland Street.
You must remember, Kenneth, ignorance has never stopped you from talking about the subject.
There were 4 people who clapped. There are 2 seconds for you, Peter, on archaic practices starting now.
Guy Fawkes, for instance, on November the 5th.
So, things keep changing in the lead. Oh, no, Clement Freud is still in the lead, but Peter Jones is now in second place ahead of Amy MacDonald and Kenneth Williams just 1 behind Amy. Amy, your turn to begin, and the subject is ticklish situations. And there are 60 seconds starting now.
Miss?
And you've been challenged.
Hesitation.
Rubbish.
Nonsense.
Good.
Rubbish.
He's been very generous because you've only been going for 3/4 of a second, actually. And it was a very ticklish
Sounded
situation.
longer.
So, Amy, you have another point, and ticklish situations are still with you. 59 seconds starting now.
Often people find their feet are their ticklish situations. In my case, this is not true. You can tickle those things on the end of my legs as much as you want.
And Amy MacDonald is challenged for hesitation.
Press my button. I didn't mean to. It was panic.
Oh. I thought you did mean to, Amy, because you challenged for hesitation, and you get a point for hesitation.
Did I?
Correct challenge, yes.
Oh, of course I did.
Yes! For those of our listeners who are still completely in the dark as to what's been going on here in this Paris studio of the BBC, when Amy MacDonald talked about her ticklish feet, Peter Jones made a dive for them under the seat, which amused everybody in the audience, and Kenneth Williams thought he was up to no good under the counter there. But Amy MacDonald still has the subject. There are 43 seconds left. Ticklish situations starting now.
It's when they work up the body that things start to get uncomfortable. Behind the knees, for example, is very strange. The worst part for me is
Amy MacDonald is challenged.
I thought I'd do it again because he's doing things to me.
Peter Jones is still doing things to Amy MacDonald. And her only form of defence in a ticklish situation is to challenge herself.
Can I just finish this, Peter, please?
Yes, would you like to press my button?
So, Amy, you have another point for challenging yourself, and it's a correct challenge.
How many more seconds have I got to go down?
You've got 28.5 on ticklish situations, starting now.
Kenneth
Williams challenge.
Well, that was very, very difficult.
Yes, it was.
I'll give that to you, darling. You've been dying to have it all the time, haven't you?
We'll no more comments on that, and Kenneth will take over the subject, which is rather apt after Amy's particular remark of ticklish situations. There are 27 seconds left, starting now.
I faced a very ticklish situation with tinea, which I got in the crotch, and I was forced to apply calamine lotion. Well, I ran all round the regimental paddock. I was never in such agony, I cannot tell you, in all my life.
Amy MacDonald challenge.
What's agony, darling?
It's Kenneth's particularly flamboyant and poetic way of saying agony. But anyway, Kenneth, I know what you were conveying, and though you deviated from enunciation, you are still with us on ticklish situations, 13.5 seconds, starting now.
And the medical officer said that henceforth, during that suffering, I should be excused wearing khaki drill.
Amy MacDonald challenge.
Hesitation.
No!
What? Wearing khaki, he went.
I know he did. I saw him, and so did everybody in our audience here. If you like, I'll put it to the audience. If you agree with the challenge, you boo for Amy, and you cheer for Kenneth, and you all do it together now.
Yes, they all adored me. One could feel the waves of affection. You see that? They're on my side. They should never have women on the show at all.
I think you're overplaying your hand now. They were on your side till you went over the top and they started to boo. But Kenneth, you had the benefit of the doubt from the audience and from me, so you're well there with 5.5 seconds. It's the last round, and you're all very close. What's going to happen? Ticklish situations starting now.
The ideal thing to do is to rub in permanganate of potash and follow that up with a little poudre of Rochelle.
Well, this is about the closest contest we've had for a very long time, and only 1 point has separated the respective challengers and panelists. Peter Jones, giving his usual good value, finished in 4th place, but only 1 point behind Amy MacDonald, who was equal in 2nd place with the one and only Kenneth Williams. But our frequent winner, just 1 ahead of them, was Clement Freud. So I'm sure that Clement is happy to share that applause with the 2nd and the 3rd. And we'll say from all of us here, thank you very much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll want to tune in again. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud and John Junkin in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome as our guest this week John Junkin to try and pit his wits, his talent, his verbal dexterity and ingenuity against our 3 able exponents of the game, our 3 regulars. And once again, they're going to try and talk, if they can, on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do it without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from that subject. And let us begin the show this week with Clement Freud, and the subject, Clement, is parking meters. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
Parking meters provide some of the greatest revenue in this country, in that when you...
John Junkin has challenged right away.
It's not actually a challenge, Nick. I only played this game once before, and every time I challenged, they said no, because he really talks like that. I just wanted to, for the record, does Clement really talk like that?
Well, we'd better ask it. Clement, do you really talk like that?
No, I have a high-pitched Yorkshire accent.
Just checking, thank you.
Just checking. Well, if what he said is true, you've actually won the challenge. You realise that?
Have I?
No, you haven't. Because I do believe Clement does actually talk like that. So he has a point for a wrong challenge. He keeps the subject. There are 54 seconds left. Parking meters starting now.
Open up a parking meter and you will find revenue of all sorts.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Definition of revenue.
Yes, that is right, Derek. You take over the subject, having gained a point, and the subject. 50 seconds left. Parking meters starting now.
I think one of the few excitements left to one in this curious world in which...
Clement Freud is challenged.
2 ones in a sentence. One of the few excitements left to one. It's a bit quick, isn't it?
It was a bit quick. It was a
and
bit of a
does
quick
he always
challenge.
speak like that?
No, I normally speak...
Do you... let's establish... How do you normally speak, Derek?
Well, with I speak normally with a rather heavy, bearded voice and a bald head, and try to bore everyone to tears in the House of Commons.
Right. So, Derek, I'm sorry, your impersonation of Clement didn't quite get away with it. He has the subject, and 47 seconds parking meters, Clement, starting now.
You tend to see people limping away from parking meters because they've kicked them in order to hurt the mechanism so that they will not have to pay pennies or 5p, even 10 pieces, which they now take. I know a fellow who lives in Wimpole Street, not far from my own residence, who went to hospital quite frequently with damage to his ankle.
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Repetition of frequently.
Yes, you did say frequently before. So, Derek, you've got the subject back. Another point, 22 seconds, parking meters starting now.
I think the people that look after parking meters are the most obnoxious creatures in the whole wide world. Those frightful yellow-hatted women, how I loathe them to
John Junkin has challenged.
Deviation, he's talking about wardens, not about traffic meters.
You're absolutely right, John. A very good challenge.
And they're very attractive people.
Yes. I think, and they're not in yellow, they just have a yellow band, and that's the only thing about them. I think some of them are charm. You just need to get around them, Derek. It does need a bit of charm, Derek, in order to chat to them on occasions, but that's something you wouldn't know much about. So,
you'll be sorry for that.
I have to take every opportunity when Derek Nimmo's on the show to get back a bit. John, you have a point and the subject. There are 12 seconds, parking meters starting now.
Without being accused of deviation, may I say I do always talk like this. The principle of...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
He is deviating. It's not a sort of word.
How can you deviate by starting on something? You can only deviate if you start on something and go off it and come back.
No, you mustn't. You mustn't deviate from the subject of the card, and you never established
Always
what you were
explain
saying.
new rules to me, Nicholas. Why was this not made clear
No,
beforehand?
you just know the one golden rule they all play: argue with the chairman and see if you can get away with it. It's not going to work this time, John. Derek was correct. He has 7 seconds on parking meters starting now.
When you find a parking meter that is jammed, the heart sings, and then you park your machine beside it and have hours of free...
When the whistle is blown, it tells us that 60 seconds is up. And if the regular listeners at home are wondering why it was such a gentle blow this week, it was because it was blown by Sandra Pronga, who has taken over from Ian Messiter, who, alas, could not be with us. And whoever is speaking when that whistle is blown has the extra point. It was Derek Nimmo, who, of course, has the lead at the end of that round. And, Derek, we'd like you to take the next round. The subject is What I Want for My Birthday. Can you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
I want ice creams and lollipops and jellies, paper hats and novelties, carnival gaiety, and all those games that one used to play in one's youth, like Postman's Knock, kissing all the pretty little fair-haired girls that beat at the door, and then Blind Man's Buff. How many of you have played that wonderful sporting occasion when everyone goes round feeling and groping, trying to find what is going on? Then...
Clement Freud is challenged.
I have.
Oh, it was you back there, was it?
Yes. So let's give Clement a bonus for a nice challenge, but Derek gets a point for being interrupted and keeps the subject, What I Want for My Birthday. There are 22 seconds left starting now.
And the conjurer who will do clever things with ropes and finally produce out of a top hat a birthday cake with my name on it. The number of candles is rather irrelevant. But in fact, I think finally we will have going home presents. They are very important, tied up with pink string, and as the nannies come to collect all...
So, Derek Nimmo started with the subject, and in spite of being interrupted, finished with it. So he's got 2 points in that round, and another one for speaking as the whistle went. And, Kenneth, will you begin the next round? Very nice to hear from you. The subject is curiosity. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
It means that desire to know, the curiosity which is in all human beings, gives that impetus to open a door, so to speak, and enlighten. Therefore, we can say it's a healthy thing to possess. A very eminent surgeon told me that curiosity led him to come to this conclusion about every single operation he'd been concerned with. He told me it was like opening a Pandora's box. He said, you never know what you're gonna see inside. And I said to him, well, that's a thought that had never occurred to me. I'm a
So, once again, the person who started with the subject finished with it, and Kenneth had another point for speaking as the whistle went, and he is now in second place, alongside Clement Freud, behind our leader, Derek Nimmo, and John Junkin is only a little way behind in third place. John, will you begin the next round? The subject is swindles. Can you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
Swindles, although it may not be generally known to the panel, is the name of a very small firm of hardware manufacturers in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I happen to know this because the youngest son, John Swindles, came to this country some time ago, and I had the privilege of meeting the aforesaid Mr. Swindles, who told me a little about what his forebears do in Wisconsin. Swindles...
Clement Freud's challenge.
Even in Wisconsin, they don't have forebears.
Yes, I must say, yes, that comes very ill from someone who's picking me up for pronunciation only earlier on.
So what is your challenge, Clement?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Clement. Quite right. People come in here, laying down the law, and then can't speak properly themselves. It's a joke, isn't it?
I would say that it's quite possible to have forebears in Wisconsin, even if you only settled there. They might still be in another country, so we can still have forebears, even though they don't live there. He did repeat Wisconsin, but you didn't challenge him for that. So, John is in luck. He has a point, keeps the subject, and 33 seconds starting now.
Swindles.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of Wisconsin.
But he didn't repeat it then.
There's no time limit on challenge.
So you're making new rules, are you?
If this one is allowed to stand, Parsons, you have made a rod for your own back that you will...
I make rods for my own back every week.
Not like
But don't worry, John. I'm not going to let that one go. No. It was a nice challenge, but let's give Clement a bonus. It was a good challenge, wasn't it? But John gets a point also for keeping the subject, being interrupted. Swindles is still with you, John, and there are 31.5 seconds starting now.
Swindles is another term for a type of confidence trick. These are perpetrated by gentlemen who are known as tricksters, and their method of plying their dubious trade is to approach some innocent passerby in some such thoroughfare as possibly, shall we say, Trafalgar Square?
Derek Nimmo challenge. Yes, I think he was getting so slow.
That was acting.
And that's the point to the challenge. It was Derek Nimmo, wasn't it? So he has 9 seconds to take over Swindles, starting now.
Swindles is a word that was introduced in the English language.
John Junkin challenge.
Repetition of word.
When did he say word before? He hasn't spoken.
About 4 minutes ago.
But he hasn't spoken in this round.
No, just testing to see whether that one about Wisconsin would stand up.
No, it's if you repeat the word in their round, except for the word on the card. Sorry, John, a good try, but Derek has more points and 7 seconds. Swindle starting now.
Swindles, brought into the English language by Jewish immigrants in the 18th century, was a word from...
Clement Freud.
Repetition of word.
Yes,
Well, I wish you'd let him go on. I was fascinated. I never knew that. I mean, the 16th century, did it?
17.
18.
18. Really?
It's amazing. Have you any other questions before we can continue?
You see,
just because we have a lot of youngsters...
I learned something, and that's very interesting, Derek. I wish you'd been allowed to go on enlightening us. I thought it was most of...
John Junkin, yes, what have you got to say?
Kenneth's boring.
You don't have to come on just a minute to discover that.
I'm sorry.
So, Clement, you got in with half a second to go on Swindles, starting now.
Cheat.
No, I'm sorry. Clement, you were speaking then at the 60 seconds. You have an extra point, but you're still in second place. The subject is statisticians, and if you can pronounce it, would you please talk on it for 60 seconds, starting now.
Statistician is not at all a difficult word to pronounce. You would go to a statistician if you lost your telephone number and ask him to estimate it. That's the sort of useless job which these people do. But if you wished to perceive, find out, or learn, glean...
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think that was, Derek. So you have the subject, there are There are 38 seconds on statisticians starting now.
As I came through London Airport this morning, there was a great team of statisticians trying to find out why the luggage was appearing so slowly. In fact, there were more statisticians than customers, and they were actually taking photographs of the portmanteaus, cases, boxes, and bags that came through on the trolley. Every now and again, and they snapped away, put things down onto their
John
files.
Junkin challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, it was, I think, John. So you have 16 seconds on statisticians starting now.
Statisticians are the people who prove time and again that the old adage is totally correct, that there are lies, there are damned lies, and...
And Derek Nimmo challenged.
2 lies and 2 there are.
Yes, that's right, Derek. 5 seconds with you on statisticians starting now.
If you take the numbers 43 and divide it by 2.7, you will find a most interesting statistic, which proves...
A magnificent blow on the whistle there by Sandra, on the button, and really clear, so we know that Derek Nimmo gets an extra point for speaking as it was blown. And Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject is noodles. Will you tell us something about those in the game starting now?
Mi goreng is one of my favorite noodles, which you can eat in the harbor in Malacca or down through Port Dickson and even in Johor Bahru. Noodles originated probably in China, and sometimes it's said that Marco Polo brought back the recipe all the way from that place for many... Thank you.
Repetition of many.
Yes, 39 seconds are left with noodles, and it's you, Clement, starting now.
Noodles is something on which the Chinese cuisine is almost based in that whenever you go to Oriental restaurants and order half a portion of number 43 with a half of 198.
And Derek Nimmo.
2 halves.
2 halves, yes. It does make a whole, but not in just a minute.
Half?
There are 37 and a half seconds. Noodles, Derek, starting
I
now.
suppose my favorite Chinese noodle would be Mao Chow Fan, which is mixed with those dear little bits of crab meat and fine South Sea.
John Junkin.
Hesitation.
No, he wasn't hesitating there.
Was he acting?
Wasn't acting.
Yes. He acts
He's
all
a
the
bit
time.
desperate, but he wasn't acting.
Anyway, 22 and a half seconds on noodles, starting now.
Some people, like Nicholas Parson, need their noodles seeing to. But apart from that, I think when one goes to Indonesia...
Kenneth Williams.
Oh, deviation, because he said you want your noodles seen to, whereas he meant noddle.
That's
didn't
right,
he?
yes.
So that's deviating from correct English, isn't it?
He really meant nodules, didn't he?
Oh, did he?
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. I thought... I didn't know there was anything
And you
wrong
should
with
never
it.
get your noodles muddled with your nodules, or you will be in trouble. Go into a Chinese restaurant and ask for a plate of nodules, and you will be very surprised at what arrives. Kenneth, I agree with your challenge, and you have 9 seconds. I actually overcalculated last time on you, Derek. There are 9 seconds left on noodles, starting now.
A famous Scots dominie used to cry out, "You noodle!" to a creature who he thought was not properly responding to the...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Perhaps he's using it in exactly the same way, just complained about me.
No, he said you noodle.
The man was a fool. You said it about his head. You said his head is noodle, whereas I'm talking about a boy being a fool, which is a different matter entirely. It's not
Nicholas Parsons is a fool.
Well, yes, I know. You aren't.
Shall we put that to the audience?
Yes.
Yes!
Is Nicholas Parsons a fool? All in favour cheer on all who don't
That's a
think
very
he's
weak
fool.
response. Is Derek Nimmo one? There you are. It's equal. They all think we're all fools up here. We wouldn't be playing the game otherwise. That'd be ridiculous. Right, Kenneth, you have a half a second, having got another point there, starting now.
Composed entirely of stars.
So, at the end of that round, Derek Nimmo's in a strong lead, but Kenneth Williams catching up. He's now equal to Clement Freud in second place. John Junkin is trailing a little, and Kenneth begins the next round. Kenneth, the subject is quackery. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
It refers to the practice by certain people of fraudulently convincing others they have a talent which, alas, they do not possess in any way whatsoever. But The success of these people has been reported in our newspapers. Yes, I have seen an account of a lady who said the treatment was wonderful that she'd got. And later, it transpired that this bloke would never been a practitioner at all, and that all these certificates...
John Junkin has challenged.
Hesitation.
No, it was lovely. He had some of the audience absolutely corpsing over there. He had them wriggling like a pop group gets them going. You're a cult figure, there's no doubt about it.
That's true, I am. It's true what he says, though. They do, I am a cult. They all say, what a cult figure that is. They all do about me, he's right. Nice looking fella too, isn't he?
You see how he visibly blossoms under a little bit of flattery.
Well,
Kenneth,
yes, we all need it, don't we? An ego massage, it goes a
Kenneth,
long way.
you've got the audience going while they're in the palm of your hand. Keep going on quackery with 22 seconds starting now.
And that Jacob man said something delightful about it when he referred to the bill of the duck and the quack that comes out. And he said that he thought the Almighty had a...
Clement Freud has challenged. Had is, yes. So, Clement, you've got in with 7 seconds to go on quackery, starting now.
Anyone who can boast the title of MD Edinburgh failed would be absolutely okay to say that he was a quack.
So, Clement Freud got the extra point. Speaking as the whistle went, he's gone one ahead of Kenneth Williams, who's in third place. Derek Nimmo's in the lead. John Junkin is in fourth place, and he begins the next round. And the subject, John, boo. A lot has been spoken about that in just a minute. Can you talk on it in the game starting now?
A boo is a method of signifying the disapproval of an audience and is very rarely spoken of in the singular. One tends to talk of boos because the people who gather for some form of entertainment do not emit a single boo, but a series of them. It is, or has been until comparatively recently, the only real way in which this can be demonstrated by individuals in a hall, until some time ago when football teams...
Clement Freud.
Hesitation.
I don't think so. He was struggling and he increased his delivery of speech, which was an admirable thing to do.
That's what hesitation means.
So, you see, John, how I try to be fair, particularly to our guest. John, you continue on boo with 30 seconds starting now.
Football teams from the continent and further afield came to play their game in this country, whereupon the individuals...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Well, dare I say hesitation?
That was a definite hesitation, I'm afraid, Derek, yes. You have 21 seconds for boo, Derek, starting now.
It was my great pleasure, some many years ago, to play in a piece called the...
Clement Freud.
That was hesitation.
Yes, it was, Clement, yes. 16 seconds on boo with you now, starting now.
Ya and sucks are actually words of...
John Junkin. Yes, I agree, John, without you saying it. I haven't said anything. Derek Nimmo, what's your challenge?
Hesitation.
I know, but John Junkin buzzed first.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yes.
Oh, so
That's all right. He's only a guest. I mean, just spash him when he's
we must have pressed simultaneously.
All right. There are 13 seconds on boo, starting now.
Boos in the plural can also sound...
Clement Freud. What is your challenge?
You said plural before.
Yes, I know, but there was a...
It was repetition.
It was repetition, but I have to hear you say it.
I'm so sorry.
Otherwise, we don't know at home, as people, whether it's a correct challenge or not. It might be incorrect, mightn't it? Very unlikely coming from you, but it could be, you know.
Quite
it
right.
could be.
Quite right.
Yes, there are 10 seconds for you to take over the subject of boo, starting now.
I very well remember an evening in the Haymarket Theatre in London when the entire audience, prior to walking out of the auditorium, decided to give the bird in no uncommon fashion.
So Clement Freud, speaking as the whistle went, has improved his position. He's only 2 points behind our leader. Our leader is 4 ahead of Kenneth Williams and a little bit more ahead of John Junkin, and Clement Freud begins the next round. Clement, the subject is records I would like to break. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
78 RPM of Nicholas Parsons' great moments as chairman of Just a Minute is, I think, the record that I would most like to break, preferably over the head of the aforesaid member of Equity sitting on my left at this moment. But there are...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
No, I think we have gone too far.
Yes, yeah.
No, because Nicholas is very sensitive, and I do think that, Clay, I think you're being cruel now. I'm sorry, I don't usually defend Nicholas, but on this particular occasion, I think we've got to stand up and be calm.
Have you actually had a change of life or something, Derek?
Well, if you don't want to be nice to you, I'll just revert to my usual self. I did think that was a bit nasty, hitting you over the head with a gramophone.
I thought it was a rather lovely image. I saw all the pieces splintering, and as this was a fictitious record...
He's got such a thick skull, nothing comes through to him, does it?
It doesn't take them long to revert to the normal, does it?
The last time I'd be nice to you, I can do that.
I'll tell you what, we give Derek a bonus point for a very
That's
good
all
challenge.
he was after, the creep.
That's all they're ever after, anyway.
Give him the subject.
No, you get a also point.
Give him
And you continue, Clement, on the records I would like to break. 42 seconds, starting now.
Almost everything in the Guinness Book of Records, from page 1 right down to the end, which is called 428 in a good year, there are records that I would quite like to break. Making omelettes within half an hour using no eggs is the sort of useful record which...
Kenneth Williams' challenge.
A deviation. I mean, he's talking about making omelettes with no eggs. It's ridiculous. The whole point about an omelette is you have to have an egg.
Yes, so,
It's silly, isn't it? I mean,
Kenneth,
you
a good
make
challenge.
a record, you wouldn't establish a record, would you? Because you wouldn't make it an omelette at all, would you? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Kenneth, you take over the subject then, and there are 24 seconds left. Records I would like to break, starting now.
I would like to break that record with that actor who got up on the stage and did this long sentence. Do you remember, Nimmo, you recall the occasion when that long sentence was said, and they all said afterwards that they didn't know how she got through it. You remember?
No, he obviously doesn't. So John Junkin did challenge.
He said long sentence twice.
Yes, he did. He said it 3 times, actually. But, John, you've got in, and there are 14 seconds to go on records I would like to break, starting now.
The record...
Kenneth Williams challenge.
Hesitation, I'm afraid.
No. And to a guest as well. John, you continue.
Am I not allowed to breathe in?
You're not allowed to do a lot of things in this game, if they can get away with it. But they're not going to, John. You still keep the subject. There are 13 and a half seconds, starting now.
The records that I would most like to break myself are those in the sporting field, such as the 100 meters dash, the 220...
Clement Freud has challenged.
Repetition.
Of what?
100 and meters was just coming up.
Yes.
I didn't actually repeat it.
And I need the point.
You do, yes. Your challenge for repetition of meters. It was coming up, but he hadn't actually said it. So...
100 and then 200 in that...
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, that's a repetition. You're quite right.
I said 220.
No, there are... Clement, there is 1 second left for records I would like to break, starting now.
Marathon.
So we have come to the end of this game of Just a Minute, and it's a very interesting result because, as usual, they all gave their normal good value to the contest. John Junkin, being our guest, has a tougher problem than the others. He finished in 4th place, but only 1 point behind Kenneth Williams, and he was only 3 or 4 points behind our joint winners. What a very fair result. Derek Nimmo with Clement Freud. We do hope that you have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and we'll want to tune in again same time next week when we take to the air and we play the game. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Derek Nimmo and Sheila Hancock in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you just heard, we're delighted to welcome back Sheila Hancock, who very graciously and kindly comes along to try and compete with these three unruly regulars. So, Sheila, welcome to the show. And once again, along with the other three, I'm going to ask you to speak, if you can, for just a minute on some subject that I will give them without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. And we begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. And, Kenneth, the subject is fruit. So, can you tell us something about fruit in the game, starting now?
It's used jocularly very often. People cry out, "Hello, me old fruit!" And if we're asked for a favourite delectation, I would plump for the kumquat. It is a delightful taste, and the rind, being acid, the inside being sweet, provides a delightful paradoxical, if you will...
Sheila Hancock has challenged.
Repetition of delightful.
Yes, you said delightful twice. So, Sheila Hancock, who's very sharp in this game, has got it very rapidly.
Miss Sharp, straight out the knife box.
And there are 41 seconds for you, having got a point for a correct challenge, Sheila, to take over the subject of fruit, starting now.
The best fruit I've ever tasted was when I went, luckily, to a holiday in Bali, where you have the most exotic, subtle tasting things that you've ever seen in all your life. And the colours are mellow greens, bright reds, vivid oranges, livid yellows. And the tastes leave a kind
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, she really was running
kind
down...
of elongation more than anything.
Yes, it was an elongated, clever, subtle ploy to keep herself going.
I didn't know what the hell to say next.
Don't think you quite achieved it, Sheila. There are 18 and a half seconds left, Derek, for you to take over the subject of fruit, starting now.
Sheikh Rashid of Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, has built the most magnificent fruit gardens, and you get into a motorized dhow, and along a railway track you travel through vast pineapples, bananas, grapes, pears, and so
on. Kenneth Williams has
challenged. You said you travel through vast pineapples. Well, I've never seen anyone travelling through a vast pineapple. How could you get inside a pineapple with a vehicle? The whole thing is ridiculous. You might mean pineapple plantation.
No.
You might melt...
Derek, Derek, can you explain how you actually travel through a pineapple?
High pineapples.
But you said...
And you travelled through them on this little dhow.
Yeah, but you said you travelled through grapes as well. Can't have a 10-foot grape. No wonder there's trouble in the Middle East.
Derek, I think you've made your point. You can travel through out in the east through this huge cut-out pineapple. So you keep the subject with 4 seconds to go and a point for a wrong challenge, starting
B.G. Woodhouse said "what ho fruit" very frequently in his books, and particularly
Peter Jones challenge just before the second.
Repetition.
What of?
P.G. Woodhouse was repeating this thing. He says it many times in his books.
I mean, it was a repetitious thought, but he wasn't actually repeating any of the words in Just a Minute, which are the rules, Peter, which, as you've only been with us about 14 years, might be very difficult.
Yes, well, I'm trying to get the hang of it.
Yes. Right, so, Peter, let's give Peter a nice point for that, because we enjoyed the challenge. Derek gets one for a wrong challenge, and you have half a second, Derek, to continue on fruit, starting now.
One time.
Oh! So, when Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. It was Derek Nimmo who naturally has the lead at the end of that round. He seems to have some spare fruit on him at the present moment. If you wondered what that unsolicited laugh was, listeners, it was Derek Nimmo spilling water all over himself. He'll do anything to get the audience reaction. Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject is rocking chairs. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
I like rocking chairs. I have several at home. What a marvellous invention they were. I suppose perhaps they may have arrived by accident, because the first person who ever made a chair of any kind, it was probably wobbly because the legs weren't quite even. We have several of those at our...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Several.
Yes, there were more than one several. I'm sorry, Peter.
Yes, there was.
Yes. So Derek has another point, and the subject of rocking chairs, and there are 44 seconds starting now.
Often on a midsummer afternoon, I climb into my rocking chair on the veranda, snuggle up, and watch the sun go down behind the distant mountains, smoking a while my briar pipe, in which I have decomposing compost. But the rocking chair is a lovely creation, as Mr. Peter Jones so wisely put it. Somehow it induces within one this feeling of tranquility and sounds. I think that's probably why that awfully clever comedian often sits in one. He sings, I think, as well.
Sheila Hancock.
Oh, no, I thought he said awfully twice.
He did.
He said awfully an orphan. It sounded the same coming from him, but it isn't.
Yeah. It's this new Dubai accent he's picked up. It's very confusing. So, sorry, Sheila. You see, he didn't actually. So, Derek, you continue with 11 seconds on rocking chairs, starting now.
Wilberforce Jones invented a kind of rocking chair.
Peter Jones.
Repetition of Jones.
Absolutely true.
Right. So, Peter, you have 7 seconds, no, 8 seconds on rocking chairs, starting now.
Yes, well, I've sat many an hour in a rocking chair.
Peter, Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of sat.
You sat before, I'm afraid, Peter.
Did I?
Yes, you did. When you
I don't remember that.
I know, but I have to remember, otherwise they castigate me. There are 5.5 seconds on Derek with rocking chair, starting now.
And sometimes I push them up and down so rapidly they spin right over, head over heels, and fall down onto the road beneath.
Nimmo got quite a number of points in that round, including one for speaking as the whistle went, so he has increased his lead, and he also begins the next round, and the subject is shooting stars. Will you tell us something about those in the game, Derek, starting now?
Shooting stars are, of course, meteors that go through the night sky with a great luminous light before they hit the earth. In times past, they were often equated with comets as a sign of impending disaster. When one saw a shooting star, one was filled with fear because you thought some tremendous calamity was about to take place. I think one was seen before the death...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Well, he keeps talking about one.
Yes, he's had actually 4-1.
Yes, 4-1 was make 4.
So... Peter, I agree with your challenge.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And there are 34 seconds for you to take over the subject of shooting stars, starting now.
Actually, it's an electronic game that I've invented. You can play it with your television set, and you aim a plastic gun.
Derek Nimmo, challenge. No, almost, but not quite. You keep the subject, and there are 26 seconds on shooting stars, starting now.
Pulling the trigger when you see a particular celebrity you dislike intensely. And this game, I think, has got an enormous future.
What a pity.
Sorry, repetition of game.
Yes, you did say game before. What a pity.
Yes, well,
We were wondering all the stars that you were going to be put up for shooting down.
Yes.
Derek has got the subject back. Then there are 18 seconds on shooting stars, starting now.
I think probably I would like to shoot Oliver Reed more than most stars, because he doesn't seem to be particularly tiresome. If Nicholas Parsons were one, I think I would also fire. Sadly, of course, he would never be one of these great luminaries. But as they said...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Well, he said 1 twice again, so that's 6 altogether.
After what he's just said, I'd give it against him anyway.
Well, I know. It's like Princess Anne on the show.
Peter, you got in with 3 seconds to go on shooting stars, starting now.
Shooting stars could be a blood sport.
Peter Jones kept going till the whistle went, gained that extra point as well as others in the round, and he is creeping up on our leader. He's only 3 points behind Derek Nimmo, but quite a few ahead of Sheila Hancock and Kenneth Williams. Sheila, your turn to begin, and the subject is the problem I had last week. Right. 60 seconds starting now.
Well, I suppose the biggest problem I had last week was my indigestion. I woke up one morning with this terrible pain across my stomach.
And interference.
No, it was me. I just suddenly thought, oh, what will happen if Kenneth gets this subject? Knowing the things I've heard him say in private about indigestion. It's in the interests of the public that you let me keep this subject for a long time. It really is. No, I just got the giggles.
I know you did.
I just got the giggles.
What made you laugh in the middle of this harrowing story?
She was laughing. Listen, Sheila,
It
talk
was
about
Kenneth
it in
and I used to have, when I was in a show with Kenneth and I, we used to have endless jokes about indigestion, which he was always getting. And
Sheila,
I suddenly remembered.
Save it for the show, because I'm going to let you continue.
Oh, all right.
Right. So, Sheila still has the subject. I don't know how, but there are 47 seconds on the problem I had last week, starting now.
Well, I woke up in the morning and I found this.
It must be hesitation or something.
I think it must be
sort of general collapse.
A general collapse. I think you'll have to take it over whatever happens, Derek, because I don't think she could continue with her interference. There are 43 seconds, Derek, for you. The problem I had last week, starting now.
Oh, the problem I had last week was trying to get to Just a Minute because I happened to be in Bahrain and then flew from there.
Kenneth Williams.
And then flew.
Yes. Hesitation. Right, Kenneth, you have this problem now. On the problem I had last week, starting now.
The problem I had last week is one of the reasons why Miss Hancock was laughing, because I have it frequently, and it was to do with eructation. That is the emission of air which can come from either end of the body. A lot of amusement for the lady I mentioned before, because in the middle of a certain scene we were playing one day, there was emitted a noise. It resulted in her saying to me, I think the front row heard that, the scene did suffer instantly.
So we had the story at last from Kenneth and not from Sheila. And so, Kenneth, you kept going till the whistle went. You got that extra point for doing so.
Which means I'm in the lead.
Still in last place, I'm afraid. What does it matter when you give such value to the show?
Well, you're very charming, I must say.
You're equal with Sheila Hancock in third place, trailing a little behind Peter Jones and quite a bit behind Derek Nimmo. Kenneth, it's your turn to begin. The subject is trying. Something you never do in this game, and something you never are as well. But would you talk on it for just a minute, if you can, starting now?
It's interesting I should have been given the subject of trying, because I've attended the Old Bailey sessions very regularly. At one point, I was a devotee in the upper gallery, and later on, I had the honour, if you will, of being given a corporation seat, which is something of a privilege. And to watch those gentlemen bewigged and gowned, trying their cases with the kind of meticulous attention, even saying, just a moment, I didn't quite hear that sentence, and writing everything in longhand, intrigued me. And I remember saying to the constable at the public entrance, what court has got the best one? 'Cause I don't want all that summing up. I'm only interested in cross-examination. That's where you feel the thrust of the barrister and the question that might trap the witnesses.
Well, that hasn't happened for a while. Someone starting with the subject and 60 seconds later still having it, not having been interrupted because he didn't commit any of the faults of the game. So, Kenneth, you get a point for speaking as the whistle went and a bonus for not being interrupted, and you are still in third place. But you are ahead of Sheila Hancock, who's now gone into fourth place, alas. But you're catching up on Peter Jones and Derek Nimmo, and Peter, your turn to begin. The subject, over-emotional women. Would you like to talk on that in just a minute, starting now?
Well, it's a sexist expression. it's more often than not used by under-emotional men to describe perfectly normal human beings. I think probably Sheila will agree with me on this point. There is a tremendous prejudice against ladies in business affairs and in high places in our finance houses, for instance, and huge
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think so, unfortunately. So, there are... Well, you have to judge. Last time I gave Peter the benefit of the doubt. This time I've given it to you.
It's quite arbitrary, really. I mean, it's nothing to do with whether one has actually hesitated. But I'm quite prepared to, take part in the lottery.
Well said, Peter. There are 29 seconds with you, Derek, on over-emotional women starting now.
Maggie May.
Kenneth Williams. Undoubtedly, yes. You have the subject
You're rather lucky in the lottery that time.
You have the subject of over-emotional women, and there are 27 seconds left, starting now.
I went with an over-emotional woman on board, and this is fact, HMS Apollo. And she inquired of an engineer who was a sailor on board the aforementioned ship.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
She was on board twice.
She was on board twice.
Well, you're a fool to yourself. You just... That's what you're a fool to yourself, Nimmo, you see.
Repetition of fool to yourself, but Nimmo...
Fool to yourself every time.
You, was no lottery there. You definitely have the subject. There are 14 seconds on over-emotional women starting now.
She grabbed him in her arms and smothered him with red-hot, passionate kisses. And he fell on the floor and she rushed on top of him and tore at his hair. He screamed with submission.
Kenneth Williams, a chunk.
Well, he's describing something which might well be, in the realms of passionate love scenes and all the rest of it. But it's nothing to do with over-emotional women.
She doesn't sound as if she was under-emotional.
She was getting on top of a man and tearing his hair out. That's nothing to do with it.
There's no emotion involved in that.
No, obviously she's not emotional. She's a pugilist, I should think.
Well, she's not frigid, that's for sure.
I agree with...
Red-hot kisses. Go on, I was getting quite excited. I want you to stop now, halfway through.
Well, you said he got 4 seconds to tell us of what happened after that, and you start now.
And I grabbed hold of this man and said, "Go away! Leave this damsel in distress."
So Derek Nimmo was speaking again as the whistle went and has increased his lead. And Derek, your turn to begin. The subject, tramps. Can you tell us something about them in the game, starting now?
The glory of the merchant fleet, those dear little tramp steamers that we see going round the coast of England, often unheralded and indeed unsung. But when one remembers John Masefield's dear poem, which Kenneth, I know, knows so well, dirty British coaster with a salt cake smokestack butting through the channel in the mad March days, with a cargo of road rails, pig iron, firewood and cheap tin trays. How evocative it is, the wonderful alliteration at the end which describes that dear little tramp.
Peter Jones has challenged.
The repetition of dear.
Yes, you talked about the dear little poem, the dear little tramp, and now there are 22 seconds for Peter to take over the subject of tramps, starting now.
Well, when I was a small boy, we lived literally very near the workhouse. And tramps used to go past the house and occasionally drop in and ask for a cup of tea or a bit of bread and butter. And I was quite
Kenneth Williams was challenged.
I was quite
Yes, Kenneth. You have 8.5 seconds to tell us something about tramps, starting now.
It springs to mind the tramp who rushed up to the very well-dressed gentleman and said, "I haven't eaten for 3 days." And the man said, "Well, you must force yourself."
Well, Kenneth, speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point as well as others, and now he is equal in second place with Peter Jones behind Derek Nimmo and ahead of Sheila Hancock. And Sheila, your turn to begin. Subject, Sheila, is Winkles. After your indigestion, they've given you Winkles. don't go well together, but will you talk on the subject if you can for just a minute, starting now?
Well, I have very happy memories of Winkles. When I lived in King's Cross, it was our Sunday treat to put on our best dresses, my sister and I, over which we always wore a special apron, and we used to go to the local corner, and there was a man with a lovely barrow, and he used to sell Winkles and shrimps. And I remember they were sold in pint or 2-pint mugs.
And Derek, they were challenged.
3 pints.
Rotten thing, yes. There were too many pints, weren't there? Derek, 37 seconds on Winkles, starting now.
I remember getting a pair of shoes which were called winkle pickers, and they had very sharp points, and I was a tremendously natty dancer in those days, wonderfully good at the military two-step and the parry-glide, and all sorts of lovely movements.
Kenneth,
I'm afraid this is deviation. The subject is Winkles, now we're on to shoes. And the shoes aren't even called Winkles, they are called winkle pickers, and the subject is Winkles, so I don't think...
No, he got away from Winkles onto his prowess as a dancer.
Precisely.
I agree, yes.
Precisely.
That was Paul concisely put.
May I say what a very good chairman we've got this week.
Not the one they usually have, obviously. Kenneth, you have 24 and a half seconds to tell us something about Winkles, starting now.
I was brought up in a Cockney atmosphere, and they used to cry out, "When you're eating Winkles and the pins are few, smack 'em with an hammer like the big pots do." And we enjoyed these sort of songs around it.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Hesitation.
I don't think so, no. Continue, Kenneth, please, on
The
Winkles.
word didn't come readily to his lips, did it?
No, but sometimes they don't. But he didn't pause long enough to be penalised.
He stopped long enough for me to press a buzzer.
Kenneth, I disagree with the challenge. You keep going, if you can, for 11 and a half seconds on Winkles, starting now.
My father always used a needle to get them out and wouldn't consume any until he'd got a great pile in front of him, which always annoyed me because I felt...
Sheila Hancock.
Always.
Yes, I'm sorry, Kenneth. Sheila's got in with 2 seconds to go on the subject of Winkles, starting now.
Then you put them on a piece of white...
So, Sheila got an extra point for speaking as the whistle went, but alas, she's still in 4th place, but not so far behind Peter Jones now and Kenneth Williams, who will begin the next round. Kenneth, the subject is gin. Can you tell us something about that in the game? He's pulled an awful face, which made the audience laugh, but he's going to try and keep going if he can, starting now.
When I came out of the army, I remember thinking it was terribly smart to go into restaurants and say, I want as an aperitif a gin and Italian. If you felt particularly pretentious, you sometimes said gin and French. I never understood what these references to foreign countries really meant, and then someone enlightened me and said it's gin with a vermouth hailing from those countries. I see. And why, in the middle of this gin, is a cherry plopped? Invitingly, admittedly. But what has it to do? Basically, it's to give a special flavour to it. You see, gin is made from the juniper berry. I said I'd no idea, because, you know, I've always thought it was the sort of thing like...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Well, gin isn't made with the juniper berry. The juniper berry is used to flavour it. You can make gin out of practically anything, and they do.
Certainly they do, but they also make it from juniper berries.
You think so?
Yes, not just flavouring with it. That is the usual standard gin that we drink is from...
juniper berries?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
They must be able to slow gin, you great fool, if ever that.
Yes, that's flavouring. That's flavouring. Well, you don't see many juniper berries in this country. I suppose they must get them, the giant ones, from the places that he was talking about.
Yes, he goes travelling through them, he does.
Yes.
He goes right through the juniper berries in Dubai.
You have a point, actually, and
Yes, I've got the subject, thank you.
I have a point.
Yes.
Well, I wanted a point. That's why I pressed the buzzer.
Shut up.
Oh. About gin.
Kenneth, would you like to keep going? I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and keep going for 13 seconds on gin, starting now.
And on one occasion, drinking a gin next to a rather large lady, I said, are you having another? And she said, no, it's just the way my coat's done up.
Very good.
Oh, well, we're going to take some time to recover from that one. So, Kenneth, yes, keeping going till the whistle went. You got another point, as well as others.
And I'm in the lead. Yes, go on. Go on.
Second place.
Oh, no, you've got an awful lot of points and not got anywhere.
I know, it's
Listen.
the same every week.
I would-
never get anywhere.
You do. You got very far because you've got a lot of people have won with as many points as you've got now, 11. But this wretch over here went sailing ahead right at the start.
Why,
I'm a wretch. Yes, absolute wretch. You know you are, Derek Nemo. You.
Oh, I don't like to see discord. We should all be happy and gay.
Nicholas.
I'll be happy.
Nicholas.
I'll settle for being happy. Someone else can take over the other adjective.
Nicholas is prejudiced because he thinks you're a naturalized Arab.
He looks like one tonight in that gear he's got on,
He's just
doesn't
come
he?
from
Yes.
Dubai, you know.
Yes.
Where the big fruits come from.
Well, that's the first time that I managed to get Derek Nimmo going after having been rude to me, but there we are. So there's always a first everything. Thank you very much, Derek, and you were certainly over-emotional there, and you were going right through the pineapple, and the audience loved it. Sheila, it was lovely having you as a guest, but with these three experienced exponents of the game, I'm afraid you finished up in third place. But you were only 1 point behind Peter Jones. You were only 3 points behind 5 points behind Kenneth Williams, who was in second place. But they didn't quite catch up that extrovert exponent of the game, who I accidentally called a wretch in the most affectionate terms. But he didn't like it, because he's very sensitive, is Derek Nimmo. But our sensitive Derek is the winner this week. So, congratulations. You can stop clapping now, actually, because I just want to say congratulations to all of them for what they've contributed to the show. We hope that you've enjoyed it in the audience, and we particularly hope the listeners at home have enjoyed, and will want to tune in again the same time next week when once again we take to the air and play Just a Minute. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch. We present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Clement Freud and Derek Nimmo in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome on the panel this week our four regular, witty, impossible, irrepressible players of the game. And they're going to try and talk, as usual, if they can, on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do it without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And we begin the show this week with Clement Freud. And Clement, the subject that Hermes has chosen is the best game. Would you tell us something about that in the contest, starting now?
The very best game is when two people go into a room, each with a bottle of whiskey, and they drink all that is therein, and then one of them goes out, knocks on the door, and the other has to guess who it is. But quite a good game, which just could go for the best game, is to approach the chairman of Just a Minute with a stink bomb. And you step on it, and the smell is so absolutely foul that the entire programme has to be put back by a quarter of an hour causing enormous distress and inconvenience to the competitors who had appointments for dinner and were in fact moving to Cambridgeshire in order that elderly ladies with nothing better to do than wait for their member...
Derek Nimmer has challenged.
Deviation is not talking about the best game now. He's complaining about being late for his dinner appointment.
I think he had got well away from the best game. So, Derek, you have a point for a correct challenge, and you take over the subject of the best game starting now.
Almost the best game in my experience is...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, he's talking about almost the best game. That's
Well,
not
I
any
think
good.
it doesn't matter, Peter. You could say almost the best game, or the very best game, or not the best game.
I thought we wanted to talk about the best game. Isn't that the subject? The best game.
He's not...
Well, almost the best game isn't the best game.
Quite
It's
right.
almost the best game.
Quite right.
I think that's one of those impossible decisions that I have to make on occasion, so what I will do, I'm going to let you judge. Now, if you agree with Peter's challenge, then you all cheer for him. And if you disagree, then you all boo against him. But you all do it together now. I think the chairs have it, Peter. So you have the subject, and you have 12 seconds on the best game starting now.
Well, I think patience played with cards is probably the best game because it means that there's no...
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation. You say you can't have almost. Now you're saying probably
the best game. So, by the same token, you have 7 seconds to take over the subject of the best game, starting now.
The best game should be allowed to hang for as long as possible before you actually consume it. Otherwise, the
So, when Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. And on this occasion, it was Kenneth Williams, and I'm sure you will be delighted to hear, at the end of that round, he has a commanding lead over all the others. In fact, he has 100% more marks than they have. He has 2, and 2 of them have 1, and... Kenneth, will you begin the next round? The subject is people I shall never forget. There are 60 seconds, as usual, starting now.
The people I shall never forget are those who've influenced me or done some curious, singular thing, which means that the memory of them will forever reverberate in my memory. And I recall a meeting with Alfred Hitchcock when he said to me, "Do you know about the country lad saying to the girl, 'Tell us your name'?" And she replied, "No, but I'll give you a clue. What spreads round?" And he said, "Manure." She said, "No, ivy." And it rang out, and I thought, what a delightful anecdote. Not the sort of thing I'd have expected to be related in this quite swanky, I might say opulent, establishment in which we were dining. But I thought that showed a delightfully warm and human...
So, at last, we've had a round in which the speaker began and finished without being interrupted. And it was, once again, Kenneth Williams. So, Kenneth, you get a point for speaking as the whistle went, and a point for not being interrupted. And you have increased your lead by 200% at the end of that round. You now have 4 points, and the others still have 1. Derek Nimmo, your turn to begin. The subject is cheek. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
This is something which we all have 4 of. 2 in the lower extremity and the same number in the higher. Now, if you turn the other cheek in a biblical sense, it means that instead of asking for an eye for a year or a tooth...
Clement Freud was challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, you were struggling so well there, Derek, to get out of it, but eye for a year... I think fantastic. 42 seconds, as Clement has the subject of cheek now, starting now.
Cheek is when someone of diminished responsibility goes to the British Broadcasting Corporation and elects to be chairman of a panel game on the basis that he might have some idea of how to control people whose multisyllabic words he doesn't understand, whose meaning he is unable to comprehend, and whose hours and time he is unable to keep. I've now said unable 3 times, and because nobody's interrupted me, only...
Peter Jones is challenged.
Well, I'm not interrupting because I'm enjoying it.
Another reason that you weren't interrupted is no one could hear it because Kenneth was making the audience laugh so much. So, Peter, what was your challenge?
Deviation.
What of?
He mentioned something 3 times.
Repetition of unable. Right, Peter,
What?
you take over the subject of cheek, and there are 15 seconds left, starting now.
It'll get you a long way. I had an uncle who took me to the pictures once during the war at the Empire, Leicester Square, which had a notice above the box office which said forces half price. He put down half the money and he said Secret Service, and they let him in.
But Clement Freud challenged before the payoff. So, Clement, what was it?
A repetition of half.
Yes, I'm sorry, Peter. Good story. 4 seconds before the end, you were interrupted. Cheek is back with Clement, and what cheek as well, starting now.
Sideburns are things that grow all the way down.
Well, they all got points in that round, but Kenneth Williams is still in the lead, one ahead of the second, which is Clement Freud. And Peter Jones, your turn to begin. Peter, the subject is stink bombs. Which got a nice reaction from our audience. Maybe they've had some experience of them, I don't know. But obviously it set them alight, and they would like to hear you being set alight by the subject and going for 60 seconds, if you can, on stink bombs, starting now.
I think they're vicious and cowardly weapons, and they're quite indiscriminate, making those suffer perfectly innocent, not just the people to whom they are directed. I wouldn't ever... I would denounce anybody who used stink bombs as a means.
Derek Nimmer has challenged.
Hesitation.
I agree with your challenge, so you now very aptly take over the subject of stink bombs, and there are 42 seconds left, starting now.
I am ashamed to tell the great British public that I let off a stink bomb in this studio this evening. It has caused tremendous distress, and I'm very apologetic about it. Please, can I have your forgiveness, Nicholas Parsons? I promise I will never set off a stink bomb ever again. You see, I happen to go to a joke shop which have all kinds of different tricks. And sometimes, if you do this, you find that at the end of the day, stink bombs do produce a certain amount of merriment and love. And that's why I really quite like it. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I am sitting here with a needle through my nose and a stink bomb in my pocket.
Clement Freud is challenged.
He said Tunbridge Wells.
I must explain that the hilarity in the audience was caused by the fact that Derek Nimmer apparently was saying something about going to one of these joke shops, and in the middle of his conversation, sitting there with an angelic look on his face and a safety pin through his nose, he suddenly brought out a thing and showered himself with sort of plastic snow, as far as I can see.
Isn't it? Don't you think that's nice?
So-
£2.50 in the joke shop. Very nice.
As Derek Nimmo's obviously feels that his life as a serious actor is drying up, he's now going over to tricks and the conjuring.
I think he's trying to get this game onto television, that's what it is.
Well, he's got the right idea in the way he's playing it at the moment. I don't think he repeated Tunbridge Wells, Clement, so I leave the subject with Derek.
We're talking for about an hour and a half.
No, there are 3 seconds to go, you'll be pleased to hear, so you can get another point
What
starting
did he
now.
say if he didn't say Tunbridge
Someone
Wells?
can challenge if they wish.
Because we certainly couldn't hear him. Could you? No.
I've said now.
Stink bombs are very smelly things and most unpleasant, and I do think that...
Well, Derek Nimmer made a clean breast of it in front of the great British public. Clement Freud begins the next round. Clement, making an effort. If we haven't had too much of that from Derek, let us hear from you on the subject. 60 seconds, starting now.
Making an effort is something one says to denote that a person is trying to do his best, from which sentiment I would like to disassociate the chairman of Just a Minute, who has quite tantamountly done very much less than that. I have seldom encountered a shoddier exponent of any panel game, and I...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
I'd just like to endorse what Clement said.
Right. So, you're endorsing, so what's your challenge?
No, I'm not really. I just wanted to say that I wanted to second Mr. Freud's motion, that's all.
So what was your legitimate challenge?
It wasn't a legitimate one.
All right,
One of the
so
second
Clement
motion.
gets another point because that was an incorrect challenge, and he continues on making an effort with 37 seconds left, starting now.
One could actually make a fairly good effort at playing this game simply by going on talking without repeating yourself, showing a minimum of hesitation, and barely deviating from whatever garbage is given to you by the man sitting on my left, who interrupts virtually everything one says for no particular reason, even when one's colleagues keep their fingers way from the buzzers, as encouraging and sweet, super lovely, nice, normal, heterosexual, homosexual, ambisexual.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition of sexual.
Yes.
No, every single word was
There was a repetition, but I'm afraid they're all single
separate
words. Homosexual, heterosexual. They're written as one word, Peter.
Really?
Mm.
Well, they
Very good.
said it 3 times.
Yes. But they were different words. So, Clement, in spite of what you say, I just show how fair I am in this game. You have half a second to continue with the wrong challenge, making an effort starting now.
You go blind.
So Clement Freud was speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point, and others in the round, and he's now taken the lead ahead of Derek Nimmo and Kenneth Williams, equal in second place, and Kenneth begins the next round, which is Rudolf Diesel. Will you tell us something about him in the game, Kenneth, starting now?
Well, he was the gentleman who invented the engine, which, of course, bears his name, wherein the ignition is accomplished by the compression of air. That is what causes it to ignite, unlike the ordinary, or shall we say conventional, petrol engine. Now, he studied at the Munich Polytechnic and was taken up something of a protege of the Krupp family, who financed the early experiments. Now, what is interesting is that he...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of interesting.
Yes, you did say interesting before. I'm sorry, Kenneth. So,
It's all such nitpicking.
So, Derek, will you tell us something about Rudolf Diesel in 18 seconds, starting now?
He had a sister who was known as the Red-Nosed Diesel because she, funnily enough, had a glowing protuberance sticking out from her face. And when he visited the Krupp family in 1911, they said, "Can you please make for us some matches?" And they said, "Well, I don't know, because your things are..."
So Derek Nimmo was speaking as the whistle went and gained an extra point for doing so. Derek Nimmo, it's your turn to begin. The subject is signals, and you set a few of those off, metaphorically speaking, tonight. But will you talk on the subject with 60 seconds to go, starting now?
Her Majesty's Royal Corps of Signals are a splendid gathering of able...
Clement Freud.
Is. One corps is.
Yes. Clement, there are 54 seconds for you to take over the subject of signals, starting now.
I'm probably one of the very few people who still know semaphore. And if you hear...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Well, I know it as well.
I can believe...
Yeah, I mean...
I can
Let's
believe.
put it to the audience. How many of them know semaphores? One of very few.
Without putting it to the audience, I can believe there are not just a few people who still know semaphore. So I think that was a legitimate challenge, Derek. You have it back, and there are 47 seconds. So 48 signals starting now.
I am one of the very many people who know the Morse code, because I happen to spend a part of the time in the intelligence corps, where one discovered how messages were sent from one country to another by assorted soldiers from different regiments. And
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of corps.
No, he didn't say
Oh, at the
corps.
beginning he talked about the Royal Corps
Yes, but when
signals
he
is,
said
and then
corps.
he said the corps.
Derek, I'm sorry, I disagree with the challenge. You have 31 seconds to continue on signals starting
the
now.
London Midland and Scottish Railway was my absolutely favourite train organisation, and the signals at Crewe Junction were a delight to the eye. They go from red to green as they went up and down, and as you came towards them on the Coronation Express, you felt your heart sing, because you knew that...
Clement Freud is challenged.
You can only hear your heart sing. You can't feel your heart sing.
Well, you can.
I don't think you would actually hear your heart singing either way, because it cannot be vocals.
You can't feel your heart sing.
No, you could feel it, but you couldn't hear it because it wouldn't
And
make
he
a
did
noise.
say core twice. He said intelligence core.
I'm sorry.
I think you'd have to be pretty gone to feel your heart sing approaching Crewe Junction. I think
Clement.
you'd have to be on speed or something for that to happen.
You have the subject of signals.
Yes, I think I did say core twice.
He said intelligence core. What he did, which was very subtle, he didn't challenge you at the time. He waited, which is very generous of him.
I only said it once the first time, hadn't I?
So there we are. So, Clement, we give it to you this time with 12 seconds to go. Signals starting now.
You go to the top of a mountain and you shout, "The battle is won." And from the cliffs of Dover, your messenger portrays this to His Majesty the King. And
Peter Jones.
A messenger wouldn't portray it.
Yes.
He might take the message.
But in old-fashioned
My
English, they
messenger
do
always
talk about
portrays.
portraying a message.
Yes.
We're talking old-fashioned English in this game now, aren't we?
Oh, I don't.
Old-fashioned.
Well,
I want to know where this mountain is. It's so near to the Straits of Dover.
Yes.
So when you're shouting from the top of it, a fellow can hear you. I mean, there aren't any mountains near the Straits of Dover. The whole thing's a load of rubbish.
Actually...
Put it to the audience and see if there's a mountain near the Straits of Dover. With a portrait painted on the top of it.
Well, it might be a butter mountain or something like that.
I think... I have been generous to Derek Nimmo and Clement Freud. I will now be generous to you and give you the benefit of the doubt on this situation and allow you to continue with half a second on the subject of signals, starting now. So, Peter. No, not Peter Jones got the point, yes. So that brings him forward a little, doesn't it, at the end of that round? But he's still in third place with Kenneth Williams. And Peter Jones, will you begin the next round? The subject is supermarket trolleys. I know they're one of your great loves, so will you tell us something about them in just a minute, starting now?
Well, they certainly aren't. I don't like them. I view them as lethal weapons. And when in the hands of battle-trained housewives, they can inflict an enormous amount of pain and discomfort. And when atop them is a child who's been trained to throw tins of beans and cans of fruit and corned beef and things at innocent passers-by who are trying to do a bit of shopping, they're pretty alarming vehicles. And I would actually institute tests.
Derek Nimmo,
hesitation, really.
I think so, yes. Derek, you have 29 seconds on supermarket trolleys, starting now.
My wife takes me to a supermarket and always gives me a trolley with one wheel that only turns left. And for some reason I follow this beastly machine between the shelves and across the floor, and all the time I have absolutely no control over this fiendish piece of machinery. And I really loathe supermarket trolleys more than anything else apart from Nicholas Parsons in the whole wide world. And I also object to the way that people take supermarket trolleys away from the shops and deposit them by the roadside for people to fall over them.
So Derek Nimmo kept going magnificently with his supermarket trolley till the whistle went. Gained an extra point because you were actually speaking as the whistle went.
I know I was. I can hear it.
And your heart was singing as well, which you also heard probably, because you have gone into the lead ahead of Clement Freud, and Clement begins the next round. The subject, Clement, is Punch and Judy. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
I always find it very embarrassing when phoning people in search of situations like housemaid or cook, that my voice is instantly recognizable as not belonging to a member of the fair sex. In fact, it's pretty masculine.
Kenneth Williams, challenge.
I'd like to know what all this has got to do with Punch and Judy.
Is he
We're
actually
only just beginning to get into it.
Well, you had been going for 18 seconds,
hello.
so I don't
Really?
think that you actually hadn't established the subject yet. So, Kenneth, the correct challenge, and there are, therefore, 43 seconds on Punch and Judy, starting now.
This is a puppet thing where a bloke manipulates the aforementioned objects behind a screen, showing them in a little aperture which appears to people outside as a kind of miniature stage, and they are like the Muppets. They behave in this curious, contorted fashion, make curious movements.
Clement Freud, challenge.
Curious, Twice.
You did say curious, I'm afraid, Kenneth. So, there are 22 seconds for you, Clement, to take over the subject again of Punch and Judy, starting now.
Both Punch and Judy have magazines named after them, and given a free choice, I would certainly prefer Punch to that of Judy, because Judy is for children of delicate ages, and in fact is pretty nonsensical sort of stuff about Mrs. Willicott.
Derek Nimmo, child. Yes, because he couldn't find one of those ladies in Judy, so there are 4 seconds on Punch and Judy with you, Derek, starting now.
That's the way to do it, is what he said when he hits Jack Ketch on the top of the head. And I think that...
So, Derek's fine impersonation of... who is that one?
Nicholas Parsons.
Oh, Nicholas Parsons, of course, yes. That's right, of Nicholas Parsons kept him going till the whistle went, and he has increased his lead again. And, Kenneth, would you take the next round? The subject, great paintings. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
In the National Gallery hangs a canvas by a man called Gaccino, and it is called The Incredulity of Thomas, which I must say I've always thought was a rather pompous way of saying it, because we've never said that particular word about the saint. I've always used doubting, and I think most people that grew up in my period always did use it in that fashion. But still, there you are, that's the title, and it is beautiful. The
Derek Nimmo has challenged. Yes, but I tell you what I'm going to do.
Oh, I put in the audience.
Tell us.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. It is going to be the last round, and Kenneth has got his own subject of great paintings. It was extremely interesting. The audience were loving it, and I'm sure that, Kenneth, they would all like you to continue in spite of the challenge, because it was a marginal hesitation, and there are 23 seconds on great paintings, starting now.
The depiction is wonderfully sensuous, and I throb with excitement as I look and realise that the name means squint-eyed in actual fact, but of course the full-length name... Oh, I said that twice.
Oh, Derek Nimmo.
But, yes,
you were too
also, I
generous.
wasn't awfully keen on all this throbbing in the National Gallery.
I throb almost anywhere, you know. And incidentally, so were you about the signals of crew.
Yeah.
Art was singing with it.
Really?
You said you could hear your art throbbing.
Yeah.
Now you're taking me to task for the very same thing, isn't he?
Exactly, yes. Yes, we all throb a little on occasions, don't we? Yeah, look at this audience, they're throbbing now, aren't they? Just at the sound of my voice, you throb, don't you? You are, you see. Some of them have even gone further than that. So let's... Derek, there are 6 seconds for you to take over the subject of great paintings, starting now.
Canaletto, I suppose, the great Venetian master, is of all the painters that I've ever seen, probably the one that gives me the most...
So,
where did you see Canaletto?
Sorry?
Where did you see Canaletto? Oh, he's dead.
You try very hard sometimes, Clement. I have to tell you that at the whistle, Derek Nimmo was speaking, as you know, gained an extra point, creased his lead. We have no more time, alas, so I must give you the final score. And on this occasion, it was Peter Jones, in spite of the value that he gives to the programme, came in 4th place, a little way behind Kenneth Williams, a little way behind Clement Freud. And once again, this week, our winner was Derek Nimmo. Well, we do hope you've enjoyed the programme this week and want to tune in again at the same time next week when our regulars will be their normal, ebullient selves. And until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.